Chapter 31. Early the next morning, Lang Jie and the others came to the cave to look for Xiaofan. The wood was ready, and they were just waiting for Xiaofan to name the place. They would start building the house on whichever piece of land he liked. Xiaofan was familiar with the mountain foot district. With his current condition, it was impossible for him to build a house on the mountainside. Wouldn't that be asking for trouble? As for the place to build the house, Xiaofan already had his eyes on it. Although it was a little out of the way, he could see the situation on the mountain, the foot of the mountain, and the cave from there. Lang Jie and the others were very familiar with building a wooden house, and with their great strength, it took them only half a day to build the wooden house. They just needed to fix some small details, and the wooden house could be lived in directly. This was the first time they built a house, and the area of the wooden house was only about 40 square meters. It looked okay, and they could expand it by themselves in the future. At least they would have their own place in the future. Overall, Xiaofan was very satisfied. Lang Jie and the others wanted to chop the extra wood for firewood, but Xiaofan stopped them. He asked Lang Jie to help him build a simple wooden bed. Some people in the tribe like to sleep on stone beds, some like to sleep on haystacks, and some people built their beds with wood. Xiaofan naturally preferred the latter. It looked much more comfortable than sleeping in the cave. Xian. Xiaofan heard the voice and looked over. It was a middle-aged woman named Yi. She did not awaken her totemic power, and also lived in the mountain foot district. She took some sewing jobs, and was a good person. Xiaofan often asked her to help him sew animal skin bags. Yesterday, he took the fish and asked Yi to help him sew it. He also told her in detail how it looked like. He thought it would take 2 or 3 days, but it was done so quickly. "Aunt Yi, is it done?" Xiaofan asked with a smile. "Yes, it's not a problem." Yi handed the things over to Xiaofan. Because he still had work to do, he did not stay for long. He left after giving the things to Xiaofan. "What's this animal skin bag for?" Lang Jie, who was chopping wood, asked. "Of course, it's for training." Xiaofan didn't say much. He took the animal skin bag into the room and put it away. He hadn't tried it yet, so he didn't know if it would work. Lang Jie and the others didn't have much curiosity, so they continued with the final touches of the house. When they were almost done, Xiaofan invited Lang Jie and the others to stay for lunch. In addition to fish, there were also some plant tubers and fruits. These plants were brought over by Lang Jie and the others. Among them, there were 2 young warriors who lived on the mountainside. They were interested in fish, but they didn't have much time to fish. When it was not their turn to hunt, they would prepare stone tools and train for the next hunt. Moreover, they didn't lack food, so they didn't join the fishing team. "You can all take one back later. I have a lot of fish here." Xiaofan didn't lie. Yesterday afternoon, after he returned to the cave, he went to the river to fish with the kids in the cave. Usually, as long as he was free and there were no abnormalities in the river, fishing was a simple thing. Those fish were too stupid. Besides, when Xiaofan joined the hunting team in the future, these kids would have to take care of him. Compared to that, a few fish were a small matter. The young warriors were a little embarrassed, but when they saw that Xiaofan really didn't care about it, they accepted it. They planned to chop some wood later to strengthen Xiaofan's wooden house. While they were eating, Gu came over with a big stone vat. "Old Ku asked me to bring it to you. It's to celebrate you having your own house. You can use it to store food or water." Gu put down the stone vat and looked at the wooden house that was almost finished. He said, "Not bad. I wanted to help, but it seems that I'm not needed anymore." Xiaofan curled his lips. "If you really wanted to help, why did you come so late?" Lang Jie and the others knew that Gu was talking nonsense, but they didn't say anything out of respect for the old warrior. "Hey, is this stone vat for Xian?" Lang Jie asked a stupid question to change the topic. "Yes, old Ku specially made it for Xian." Gu emphasized old Ku and specially when he said that, and looked at Xiao Xian. According to Ji's understanding of old Ku, the old man was naturally very satisfied with Xiao Xian. In the past, old Ku also wanted to teach someone, but unfortunately, all of them were disappointing. They were either impatient or indecisive. When they encountered a medium-high quality stone core, they didn't dare to touch it. At that time, old Ku directly drove them away and didn't pay any attention to them. Many people thought that old Ku was unreasonable, but in fact, old Ku was just too disappointed. But now that he finally had his eyes on someone, old Ku still had a long face. If he angered Xiao Xian this time, who would be better than Xiao Xian in the future? Gu looked at him anxiously. In fact, on the night of Xiao Xian's awakening, after the sacrificial ceremony, Ku came back and asked Gu to exchange for a suitable big stone. After working for 2 consecutive nights, he finally made this stone vat. This stone vat was about the same size as the one Gu used to send food to the cave every day, but the workmanship was much better. The stone vat was almost the same thickness, and the inside was polished very smooth. The outside was not only polished very carefully, but also carved with some patterns, such as mountains, rivers, birds and beasts. Xiao Xian had not seen many birds and beasts before, but Ku must have seen them when he went out hunting. People like Ku usually only thought about the practical aspects when making stone tools, and rarely did they make any fancy designs. Now that he made a water vat for Xiao Xian like this, it was obvious that Ku valued Xiao Xian very much. "This stone vat is so beautiful." Lang Jie and the others surrounded the stone vat and said enviously. Although they usually valued practicality more, and didn't care much about a water vat, who wouldn't like more beautiful objects? This stone vat was not only big, but also had special carvings and a matching stone lid. Usually, most people would just cover it with animal skins or straw mats, or just cover it with stone slabs. Very few people would have a cover for the entire water tank. Even the 2 young warriors who lived on the mountainside didn't have such a cover for their water tanks. "Yeah, what a good vat. I've lived for so many years, but I've never seen such a stone vat at home," Gu said. "Is the Ku you're talking about the one who was famous for making traps?" Ong, who came with Lang Jie, asked. "Yes, that's him." Lang Jie nodded. "I heard that many people wanted to learn from Ku, but later." Ong didn't continue. What happened later? Later on, those who wanted to learn from Ku were either driven away by anger, scolded, or forced to leave. Later on, gradually no one went to him, and Ku moved from the mountain to the mountain foot area. Ku was indeed very famous in the tribe, but now very few people would mention him. Old Ku is very capable. Although he is very strict, you can learn good things from him. Gu said to Xiao Xian earnestly. "Yes, Xian, are you learning from Ku now? You must hold on, Ku was really good at that time." Lang Jie also came over. In order to encourage Xiao Xian, he also told him about his experience of learning to set a ground bow from his grandfather. At that time, he was also scolded like shit. At that time, he was not only scolded, but also beaten. Lang Ga's grandfather was also a very good warrior. Lang Jie couldn't escape from the old man's hands. Every time the children living around saw Lang Jie being beaten, they would laugh at him. At that time, Lang Jie felt very embarrassed and blamed his grandfather for a long time. Later, when Lang Jie really became a warrior, he realized his grandfather's good intentions. They hunted in the forest. Although the ground bow couldn't directly kill the beasts, it could still play a key role. Because of his excellent skill in setting a ground bow, Lang Jie was quickly accepted by the hunting team. Every time after a hunt, he would get a lot of food, at least more than others at the same level of strength. If you can learn more skills, your future path will be much easier. Not only will you be able to occupy a more important position in the hunting team, but if you are injured during a hunt and become like me and Old Ku, it will be inconvenient for you to hunt with the hunting team. But if you stay in the tribe, you can at least learn more skills to make a living, and live a better life without starving," said Gu. Therefore, Lang Jie and Gu both agreed that even if they were scolded like shit, they had to bear with it and learn as many skills as they could. It would be best if they could squeeze all the skills out of their opponents. Not to mention that Gu had a lot of good things hidden away, so they had to squeeze even more. Listening to their words, Xiaofan nodded solemnly, "I know what you mean. If you want to learn skills from others, you can ask for anything, but you can't be shameless." Lang Jie and Gu said, "Yes." Chapter 32. Xiaofan naturally wanted to learn Old Ku's craftsmanship. In addition to making stone tools, he also knew how to set traps, which were very useful for hunting. However, it was still too early for Xiaofan. He had no foundation, so he could only start with the most basic hammering skills, and slowly learn the more advanced ones later. Xiaofan could feel Old Ku's attitude towards Xiaofan. Old Ku had been helping him since a long time ago, but sometimes Old Ku's words could be easily misunderstood. For example, yesterday when he went to Old Ku to learn how to make stone tools, he tried to peel off the stone leaves, and was evaluated as useless. People who didn't understand him would definitely misunderstand. Fortunately, Xiaofan had a flexible mind. He understood what Old Ku meant after thinking for a while. Seeing that Xiaofan didn't reject their words, Gu immediately felt relieved. When he left, he planned to go to Old Ku's place later to ask for credit. It would be best if he could get something good from Old Ku as a reward. After helping Xiaofan build the wooden house, Lang Jie and the others left. They had other things to do. After all, the first hunting trip was coming soon. Every time they went hunting, they risked their lives. They had to be well prepared to return safely. There were 2 hunting groups in the tribe. The 2 groups took turns to go hunting. When one went out, the other would be on duty in the tribe. They were responsible for the safety and defense of the tribe. After all, there were too many wild beasts in the mountains, and there were many old, weak, sick and disabled people in the tribe. Each hunting group was divided into 2 groups. According to what Lang Jie said, they were divided into 2 groups according to the warriors' abilities. The first group consisted mostly of totem warriors who lived on the mountainside or above, while the second group consisted mainly of people who lived on the mountainside. Lang Jie and the others were in the second group. When Xiaofan went hunting, he would naturally follow them. After Lang Jie and the others left, Xiaofan looked at the newly built wooden house. Caesar was curiously walking around the wooden house. "If you shit in the house, I'll throw you out," Xiaofan said. When they were in the cave, Xiaofan had trained Caesar to go to a special place to shit like the children in the cave, or go directly outside the cave. Now that they had moved to a new place, he didn't know if the wolf could adapt quickly. "We will live here in the future. We will make a wooden table, chairs and stools," and, after lying on the bed and resting for a while, Xiaofan took out the sewn animal skin bag that he had delivered in the morning. He went out to find some gravel and put it in the bag to weigh it. Xiaofan found the gravel that was heavier. These gravel were thrown away as waste after the stone tools were made. There were still a lot of gravel, and they were piled up like a small hill. Probably because the stone worms didn't like the gravel, they were rarely found there. Therefore, not many people went there. When Lang Jie talked about weight training, Xiaofan thought about it. Therefore, he asked someone to help him sew a special animal skin bag. After filling it with gravel, it weighed nearly 200 pounds. Xiaofan once wondered if these stones were metal ores, but after looking at them, he found that these stones were no different from the other stones in the gravel field except that they were harder and heavier. Xiaoxian naturally wanted to use ironware, but he didn't know how to make iron. More importantly, there were a lot of things in this world that were completely different from his previous life. There were too many things that couldn't be judged by common sense. Most of the stones here were unfamiliar to Xiaoxian. Therefore, instead of spending a lot of time to study them, Xiaoxian was more willing to solve the problem at hand. He didn't want to think about making copper or iron now. He tied a few animal skin bags to his arms and legs. After tying them, he moved a little and felt that it was okay. He could still carry another stone. It was obvious that a totemic warrior's body was really strong. Then, the weight training started with his daily movements. Although Xiaoxian couldn't carry 1,000 pounds with one arm like Gu, he could still lift a few hundred pounds. If it was in his previous life, Xiaoxian wouldn't believe that he could have such strength. When Xiaoxian was trying, he saw Caesar baring his teeth outside, so he untied the animal skin bag with gravel. As soon as he untied it, he heard someone calling his name outside. "Is Xian here?" Two very tall and strong warriors came over. They looked very young, about the same age as Lang Ga. Their bodies were full of strong muscles, and their voices were rough and bold. "I'm Tua, and he's Kiki. The shaman asked me to bring you something," Tua said. Tua was much calmer than Lang Ga. Although he looked at Xiaoxian, he didn't mean any harm. There was even a smile on his face. The shaman fulfilled his promise. On the first day that Xiaoxian had his own house, he sent people to bring food to him. It was also a compensation to Xiaoxian. There was a lot of meat, all of which had been processed, and some had been pickled. In addition to the meat, there were several kinds of plant tubers and fresh fruits. In addition to these, there were 2 bags of herbs. Xiaoxian had seen 1 bag of herbs when he lived in the cave. It was mainly used to treat small illnesses, so he knew how to use it. Tua told Xiaoxian about the other bag, which was mainly used to treat external bleeding. As for the other person, he didn't seem to be a well-behaved person. And just now Tua said, "The shaman asked me to bring you something," instead of "we." Obviously, Kiki wasn't sent here by the shaman. After entering the house, Kiki kept staring at Caesar. He had his back to Xiaoxian, so Xiaoxian couldn't see his eyes. But judging from Caesar's expression, he knew it wasn't a friendly look. These warriors, who often went out to hunt, looked at animals as if they were prey. When they saw animals, they couldn't wait to stab them with their spears. Caesar's whole body was tense, and he couldn't help showing his fangs. He was almost ready to fight. "Hey, this wolf can be raised like this," Kiki said. When Xiaoxian was wondering if this warrior despised Caesar for being too cowardly and not as ferocious as the wolves in the forest, Kiki smacked his lips and continued, "It can be eaten in half a year." Caesar immediately showed his 4 fangs to the warrior, and his eyes were alert. He made a growling sound from his throat, which was a warning. It seemed that he would pounce on the warrior and bite him in the next moment. "Good." The warrior quickly pulled out the stone knife from his waist, and said excitedly. Tua, who was explaining the use of herbs to Xiaoxian, heard the warrior's words. His face stiffened, and then twitched violently. He immediately put down his things, and like a whirlwind, rushed to Kiki, who was confronting Caesar with the knife, and punched him. "Good my ass. Put your knife away." Kiki was punched and flew out of the window, and fell on the ground outside with a bang. Xiaoxian was speechless. Totem warriors were really simple and violent. After punching Tua, he walked to Xiaoxian and said, "He's always like this. He gets excited when he sees a beast. Don't worry, he's just used to it. He won't do it for real." After all, the wolf was the witch's card, so they didn't dare to do it for real. However, when he just finished his words, Kiki, who had just been punched, walked into the room as if nothing had happened. He moved his feet and walked to Caesar again. This time, he didn't hold the knife, but just rubbed his fingers. It was obvious that he hadn't given up yet. Tuo had no other choice. The witch asked him to move things here, but he didn't expect to meet Kiki on the way. When he heard that they were going to the newly awakened warrior, the one who had surprised them the most at the ceremony, Kiki immediately became interested and followed them. Tuo had wanted to talk more with this little warrior who was valued by the witch, but now he regretted letting Kiki come with him. If he let Kiki stay here, he might really fight with this wolf. This little wolf couldn't even take one punch from Kiki. What if it was killed? They would be scolded by the witch. Xiaofan only saw a shadow flash in front of him. The next moment, Tuo appeared behind Kiki and dragged him out with his arm around Kiki's neck. At the same time, he turned back and said to Xiaofan, "We've delivered the things. We'll leave now. We'll talk later when you go hunting with us." After the two left, Caesar also relaxed. He sniffed around, and then dragged out the animal skin bag that Kiki had just carried. It seemed that he was going to throw it out. Xiaofan hurried to stop him. There were some dried fruits in the bag, many of which he hadn't tasted yet. It would be a waste to throw them away. While packing up, Xiaofan recalled what Tuo had said. Tuo's last sentence meant that they were in the same hunting group as Xiaofan. But Lang Jie and the others didn't mention these two people when they were talking. The first group? Chapter 33. Early the next morning, Xiaofan tied the animal skin bag with gravel and ran to the training ground with Caesar. In the past, when he hadn't awakened, he had always been afraid. If he wasn't careful, he would be accidentally injured or even die. Now, he was much more confident. At least he wasn't so weak that he couldn't take a beating. People in the tribe did not know too many tricks. They could only imagine a prey and make a more direct response according to the prey's habits. Some warriors would treat the cliff as some kind of wild beast, and then hit the cliff with their fists and feet. Therefore, if you saw sand and stones flying around on the mountain, don't be surprised. It was just a totemic warrior practicing. Just like that night at the shaman's place, the kid could break an ordinary stone spear with one punch. After Xiaofan ran to the training ground, he chose a mountain and carried a stone. He ran from the foot of the mountain to the top. On the way, he looked for a good stone and started to dig it. "Fortunately, I have such a special ability." Xiaofan looked at the different shades of gray in his vision and sighed. Compared to the totemic power, Xiaofan's other ability undoubtedly helped him a lot. It saved him a lot of time and effort to find it. Xiaofan could not dig a middle or upper grade stone. If he hit it with his bare hands, it would hurt his own hands. After digging out the stone he liked, Xiaofan looked at the sky. It was almost noon, so he carried the stone and ran back. He went back to the wooden house to eat something, and then went to Old Ku's place with the stone he dug out. In the afternoon, Xiaofan arranged for him to learn how to make stone tools. Stone tools looked simple, but there were many skills involved. It was not just about knocking. First of all, you have to know how to identify the stone. Even stone cores of the same hardness may not be the same. Old Ku took out two similar stone cores and said. Xiaofan watched as Old Ku directly knocked and peeled off one of them, while the other was heated and cooled. Old Ku explained to Xiaofan the color change and cooling time of several kinds of stones after heating. Some stones would change in color and texture after being heated, while some would only change in texture, and some would have no reaction to the heating process at all. Sometimes, the temperature had to be controlled during heating. It was necessary to understand what temperature was the best for peeling and what temperature was not suitable for peeling. As for this temperature, without a precise instrument to measure it, he could only rely on his feelings and experience. For example, if Xiaofan felt the same temperature, old Ku would be able to tell which one was hotter just by touching it. Different stones have different reactions to different temperatures, heating times, cooling changes, and other characteristics. Old Ku placed one of the 2 stone cores he had just taken out above the fire. Holding a stone stick in each hand, he placed the stone core in the middle. The fire burned very brightly, as if it wanted to dry people out. Just by standing next to the fire for a short while, one would be covered in sweat. Old Ku's face was also covered in sweat, but his hands were still very steady. His movements of flipping the stone core were also very agile. Half an hour later, the stone core that was being heated above the fire turned from its original grayish-white color to a reddish-brown color. Old Ku then took the stone core away from the fire. However, he did not start peeling off the stone leaves. Instead, he waited for the stone core to cool down and the reddish-brown color to lighten before he began peeling off the pieces. The peeled stone leaves, whether they were slender or round, were almost the same thickness. What kind of control was needed to achieve this? At least in Xiaofan's previous opinion, without advanced cutting tools, it would be impossible to achieve this level. The so-called ideal polishing was actually a very complicated process. Those who did not understand it would not be able to imagine it at all. After the theory came practice. Xiaofan spent most of the afternoon practicing peeling stone leaves. Too much trash. Again. What the hell are you peeling off? Again. Poor control of the strength of the hammer. Again. Wait. Can this stone be peeled off directly? Did you eat too much fish? Take it and burn it. Some people who lived closer to Old Ku all knew that Old Ku's temper had become worse recently. When they talked about Xiaofan, they all shook their heads and sighed, "Xian, that poor child." In fact, the situation in the house was not as bad as the people in the tribe thought. Old Ku was not merciful with his words, but he still put a lot of effort into teaching Xiaofan the skills of peeling, so he was willing to part with the stone cores. Xiaofan knocked off 5 stone cores in one afternoon. Not counting the one he brought, the other 4 were Old Ku's own. The stones were not bad, so it was a waste to use them as practice stones. Old Ku did not feel sorry for Xiaofan, but he felt ashamed of himself. Every day, Xiaofan returned to his wooden house tiredly from Old Ku's place. His muscles were stinging, and the pain was getting more and more intense. Setting up a stone pot and lighting a fire was painful enough to make him grit his teeth. The area between his thumb and index finger was even more painful. He held the stone hammer even more tightly. It took him several tries to set up the stone pot successfully. Xiaofan felt like the one being hammered wasn't the stone core, but himself. However, he slept very well that night, and when he woke up, his whole body felt refreshed, as if the muscle pain from yesterday was just an illusion. Xiaofan did not know if this was a totemic warrior's own ability, or another special ability. Early in the morning, Xiaofan planned to go to the training ground as usual. Yesterday, he saw a place with good stones. He could dig out some good stone cores. This way, he would not have to use Old Ku's stones all the time. What if he made Old Ku poor? As he walked, Xiaofan felt that something was wrong. People who were not so active usually got up early and gathered in the same direction. After thinking for a while, Xiaofan patted his forehead. He almost forgot. Today was the day that Lang Jie and the others went out to hunt. Xiaofan took Caesar to the place where the crowd gathered. There was a road from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain, almost in a straight line. This road was higher than other places, and no one had built a house on it. The hunting team would pass through this road when they went out or came back, so they would not disturb the other residents in the tribe. Over time, this path also took on a different meaning. People in the tribe called it the Path of Glory. It was like a grand farewell to warriors who were about to go to the battlefield. People had mixed feelings. Some were proud, some were heavy, and some were hopeful. They did not know if their families were still safe when the hunting team came back. Would they be able to bring back enough food? Most of the people gathered on both sides of the path of glory were the families of the warriors who went out this time, from the elderly to the children. When the hunting team came back, these people would be here to welcome them. And the 2 times, their feelings would be completely different. However, besides welcoming and sending off the hunting team, for the warriors in the hunting team, this road also represented a kind of meaning. It was an affirmation of their own strength. If Xiaofan were to describe it, for many warriors, this road was a road to show off their wealth. When they came back from the hunt, it was clear who got how much food, just like the disclosure of assets. Rich people naturally did not lack reputation, status, or women. These were all things worth showing off. "They're coming!" someone shouted. Xiaofan looked over. There were about 200 people coming down from the mountain, and the one walking at the front was the leader of the hunting team. Xiaofan had seen him on the night of the sacrificial ceremony. Not only the leader, but also several people behind the leader, Xiaofan also felt familiar. They were all the people who danced by the fire pit that night. The people walking down the mountain, no matter if they were smiling or looking serious, each of their steps was full of momentum, like a general on the battlefield. At the back of the team, among the tall warriors, several children who were obviously shorter than the others were very eye-catching. Among them were the leader's grandson, Mao, and Fei, who had shown off in front of Xiaofan before. "Hey, who are those children?" "Of course, they are strong enough to join the first hunting team. They are the best among the awakened warriors this year." "Hey, is that Mao? No wonder he is the leader's grandson." The crowd was talking about it. Sai's father pointed at Fei and the others in the hunting team, and said to Sai, "Look, they are about the same age as you, and awakened in the same batch. They can join the first hunting team. What about you?" Sai straightened his neck. "Why don't you live on the mountain?" Sai's father choked, and directly threw 2 punches and 2 slaps at him. Chapter 34. After the hunting team left, the tribe returned to its usual pace of life. However, compared to last year, the riverside was much more lively this time. After experiencing the initial fear of the unknown creatures in the river, the people no longer feared the creatures in the river because of the benefits brought by the big-mouthed piranhas. It turned out that the creatures in the river were not so scary after all. As long as they were careful, they could get enough food. Under the joint management of Tu and Jieba, the life in the cave was quite stable. With the daily fishing activities and enough food, the small bodies of the children were not as weak as before. At the same time, the children in the cave were getting more and more united. They had no choice but to work together to fight against the enemy. The ability of a single person was too small, and they did not even have the advantage when fishing. As for the stone worms, Xiaofan would take Caesar to catch them every 2 days. After catching enough stone worms, they would store them for the children in the cave. Stones could not trap the stone worms. Some people used stone jars to put the stone worms in, but the next day, they found that there was a hole in the jar, and the stone worms were gone. However, Tu discovered by chance that wooden jars and straw ropes, which were not as hard as stones, could trap the worms better than stone jars. Even if they could not be trapped for too long, a day or 2 would not be a problem. This solved the problem of Caesar running to the cave every day. Xiaofan still went to the training ground to look for stone cores in the morning, and went to Old Ku's place to learn the stone skills in the afternoon. After more than 10 days, Xiaofan felt that he was much stronger than when he had just awakened his totemic power. He was also more skilled in controlling the totemic power, and could switch between the 2 powers in his body more freely. It seemed that learning the stone skills was also beneficial to controlling the totemic power. Xiaofan ran through the woods like a monkey, heading towards the place he had chosen yesterday. His figure flashed, and the branches swayed slightly. The sound was very low, like a breeze. Caesar ran behind him. This place was still within the range of the tribe's guards, so Xiaofan did not need to worry about any ferocious beasts. The reason why he deliberately controlled the sound was just for the future hunting activities. There were many times when one had to be stealthy when hunting. One had to quietly approach the prey and hide one's aura. If one's movements were slightly bigger, it would alert the prey or other ferocious beasts that one could not defeat. Xiaofan had seen Lang Jie and Mai's stealth ability before. Mai moved stealthily, so he was still some distance away from them. Xiaofan also saw many children who had awakened in the same batch as him, including Sai, in the mountains where he was training. "Hey, isn't that Xian?" Sai's father looked at the figure that flashed through the woods and said. For those who had not awakened their totemic power, Xiaoxian's speed was naturally very fast and hard to catch. However, for other totemic warriors who had awakened their totemic power many years ago, it was nothing. Sai jumped on the spot with a big rock in his hand. He had already jumped more than 100 times with the rock. Hearing his father's words, Sai turned his head and looked over. Xiaoxian was no longer in the woods. "What are you looking at? Keep dancing." Sai's father hit Sai's butt with a stone stick and scolded him, "You can't even beat Xian, who is 2 years younger than you." "Why can't I beat him?" Sai was not convinced. "Hey, you're still being stubborn. If I say so, then so be it. Just jump. You can't rest until you've jumped 200 times. Sai's father hit Sai twice with the stick. "I've already jumped 172 times. He just needed to jump another 28 times. Sai counted in his mind. He was a little happy when he thought about it. Should he go catch flying squirrels or look for food during the rest time? He wondered if there were any more of those green and crunchy fruits that he had eaten 2 days ago. Sai swallowed his saliva and was full of expectation. Then he heard his father say with his eyes wide open, "Do you think I don't know how to count? You've only jumped 127 times. There are 73 more." Sai was so angry that he almost threw the big rock away. However, his father's way of doing things was always right. Even if he was wrong, he had to admit it. Debate with him? He would be beaten. Damn it! Sai couldn't beat his father, so he took it out on Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian, who didn't know that he was being punished again, was busy picking stones. There were many stones in the training ground, but very few of them could be used to make stone tools. Even if he relied on his special ability to identify the grade of the stones, he couldn't find the most suitable one quickly. Because, even if it was a good stone, it might not be suitable for making stone chips. Therefore, every morning, Xiaoxian would spend a few hours picking stones, and then bring back stone cores that were good and suitable for making stone chips. After following Old Ku for a few days, Xiaoxian's ability to identify stones had improved a lot. He was no longer as clueless as he used to be, where he could see all kinds of stones the same. While Xiaoxian was looking for stone cores, Caesar was bored, so he went to stop the flying stone squirrels that were digging holes and jumping around in the mountains. Every time Xiaoxian finished picking stone cores, he would find several dead flying stone squirrels next to Caesar. Sometimes, Xiaoxian felt guilty when he looked at Caesar. Caesar was a good wolf, but he had raised him into this. In the afternoon, Xiaoxian brought the selected stone cores to Old Ku's place. Old Ku taught Xiaoxian how to determine the best angle and surface for making stone chips, and which stones were suitable for what. After that, Old Ku sat at the side and watched Xiaoxian make stone chips. After taking off his animal skin coat, Xiaoxian picked up the stone hammer and started hammering with his bare upper body. In the first few days, his animal skin coat was soaked with sweat, and water could be wrung out with a little twist. Later, Xiaofan threw his animal skin coat aside to avoid the smell of sweat. Ding! 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 The hammering sound that would be heard every afternoon began. 1 hammer, 2 hammers, 50, 51, 100 hammers, 500 hammers. As if he didn't know what fatigue was, Xiaofan kept knocking on the stone core. The huge stone core became smaller and smaller as more and more stone leaves fell from it than a few days ago. After hammering the first stone, Xiaofan did not rest. He continued hammering the second stone, the third stone. After hammering the third stone, Xiaofan felt as if he had fallen into a water tank and was fished out. After drinking some water, Xiaofan stood at the side and listened to old Ku explain the details that he needed to pay attention to during the grinding process. He explained the shape of the stone chips, how to grind them, and how to grind the rest of the stone core. Old Ku said that every stone had its own story. Even the best stoneware maker might not be able to decipher every stone. However, every time old Ku explained to Xiaofan, he would try his best to teach him everything that he had learned so far. Xiaofan listened attentively. Many of the seemingly indifferent words actually hid many skills. After resting for a while and listening to old Ku's teachings, Xiaofan continued. However, he was not hammering, but grinding. Whether it was hammering or grinding, if he wanted to reach old Ku's high standards, he had to be more careful during the grinding process. He had to control his totemic power more precisely. This was not an easy task. During the grinding process, Xiaofan was immersed in it. All of his consciousness was focused on the stone that he was grinding. It was not obvious, but once the grinding was completed and he regained consciousness, he would feel a throbbing pain in his head. Sometimes, it would feel like he was being stabbed by an awl. It was so painful that his forehead would be covered in sweat. Old Ku said that this was normal. He had experienced this in the past. Although it was difficult, the results were obvious. Xiaofan's control of his totemic power was more precise. Old Ku, who was sitting next to him, had a satisfied look in his eyes. Xiaofan's growth was far beyond his imagination. After so many years, old Ku had seen many people who learned how to grind stone, but none of them could do what Xiaofan did. Many people might not be able to do what Xiaofan did in half a year, or even 1 or 2 years. Of course, there were those who did it well. For example, Lang Jie took less than 50 days. Lang Ga's grandfather even showed off in front of old Ku. However, how long did Xiaofan learn? Only 10 days. Old Ku actually wanted to go up the mountain and have a chat with the old guy who made the ground bow. However, he decided to wait a little longer. Just as he was thinking about what kind of expression the old guy would have when he found out, Ku's eyes suddenly widened, as if he had seen something incredible. Totemic patterns appeared on Xiaofan's body. This was not strange. During this period of time, when he was learning stone crafting skills, Xiaofan would use his totemic power. Naturally, the totemic patterns on his body would also appear. However, old Ku was not shocked by the totemic patterns. What he saw in front of him was even more unbelievable than when he saw Xiaofan use his totemic power. Everyone in the tribe knew that when a newly awakened warrior awakened by the fire pit, all the totemic patterns would appear on his body. After the ceremony, the totemic patterns would shrink. The totemic patterns that originally covered the whole arm would shrink to the upper arm, slightly over the shoulder. The totemic patterns on the legs would also shrink. Therefore, when a warrior used his totemic power after awakening, the totemic patterns that appeared would be no more than the elbow or knee. This was the sign of a beginner totemic warrior. One day, when the totemic patterns reached the elbow or knee, it would be the time for a beginner totemic warrior to become an intermediate totemic warrior. This was the most direct and effective way to identify a totemic warrior's level. When warriors were hunting, when they faced countless dangerous beasts and threats to their lives, they would make breakthroughs again and again. Only then would their totemic patterns extend. However, the extension was limited. Many people with decades of hunting experience could not extend their totemic patterns beyond the elbow or knee. In other words, they were still at the beginner totemic warrior level, and their progress was extremely slow. However, what about Xiaoxian's totemic patterns? Old Ku's eyelids twitched. He clearly remembered that when Xiaoxian first came to learn stone crafting skills and used his totemic power, the totemic patterns on his upper arm were the same as those of other newly awakened warriors. They were only slightly over the shoulder. But now, the totemic patterns on Xiaoxian's upper arm had already extended to the length of a little finger. Before this, Old Ku did not pay attention to the totemic patterns on Xiaoxian's arm. Just now, he was only thinking about when Xiaoxian could become an intermediate totemic warrior. He glanced at the totemic patterns on Xiaoxian's upper arm, but he did not expect such a discovery. He could see the slightest error in the stone crafting, so how could he not see the length of the totemic patterns on Xiaoxian's arm? Don't underestimate the length of a little finger. This was something that some people could not achieve even after several years. But how long had it been since Xiaoxian awakened? At this speed, how far could a beginner totemic warrior be? Old Ku only felt his eyelids twitch even more. Chapter 35. Ku Xian rubbed his twitching eyelids and stood up from the stone bench. Since he was missing a leg, he swayed a little when he stood up. Naturally, Xiaoxian noticed him. Xiaoxian looked at Old Ku in confusion as he put down the stone tool and grindstone that were about to take shape. He was in a good state just now and didn't feel like he made any mistakes. His polishing process was also up to Old Ku's standards, but what was with Old Ku's "what the fuck" look? Xian, you. Ku Xian stuttered. You. After a long while, Ku squeezed out a sentence, "How do you usually train?" Xiaoxian didn't know what Old Ku meant, but he still explained his training schedule in detail. Of course, he didn't tell Old Ku Xian about his special ability. In fact, rather than training, it was better to say that he was preparing to polish stone tools. Many of the children who had awakened at the same time were either training their strength or practicing throwing. Only Xiaoxian spent most of his time looking for stone cores. Some people even secretly laughed at Xiaoxian for not doing his job properly. After pondering for a while, Ku Xian didn't think there was anything wrong with what he said. Xiaoxian was very hardworking and showed a strong drive when he was polishing stone tools. This was also the reason why Ku Xian was willing to teach him. However, when he was learning stone tools, he also put in a lot of effort. Why didn't he improve as fast as Xiaoxian? Old Ku couldn't figure it out. He could only attribute the reason to Xiaoxian's extraordinary talent. No wonder he awakened at the age of 10. After calming down, Old Ku waved his hand and motioned for Xiaoxian to continue. He thought for a while and stopped him. He took out a wide grass curtain and divided the polishing process into 2 parts. He motioned for Xiaoxian to go to the inner part. Although confused, Xiaoxian still did as he was told. Old Ku must have his reasons for doing this. Through the grass curtain, Old Ku could see the little figure polishing stone. Old Ku slowly rubbed a stone leaf in his hand. He seemed to have thought of something and his frown relaxed. He couldn't help but chuckle. When the sun was about to set, Xiaoxian came out from the inner compartment covered in sweat and handed the polished stone tools to Old Ku for inspection. There were more stone leaves and stone cores to be polished today, so it ended much later than usual. However, Old Ku did not check the stoneware one by one like he did a few days ago. Instead, he casually pushed the pile of stoneware aside, glanced at it for a while, and then stopped looking at it. Instead, he said to Xiaoxian, "You can go back now. From tomorrow onwards, you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want." "Okay, I got it." In fact, Xiaofan had wanted to make something of his own for a long time, but his skills were too bad at that time. The things he made were completely different from what he had in mind, and he always failed halfway. Now that old Ku said so, it was also in line with Xiaofan's wishes. To make a satisfactory stone tool, the process involved included peeling stone leaves, polishing, pressing, heat treatment, and so on. The tools needed included hammers, pressure rods, plungers, grindstones, stone anvils, and other fixed objects. Xiaofan didn't have a complete set of tools in his wooden house, so he could only come to old Ku's place every day to make something. However, Xiaofan didn't dare to think too much at first, so he started with the stone tools he was familiar with in the tribe. The next day, Xiaofan took the stone cores he had picked for the whole morning to old Ku's place and started polishing. Xiaofan wanted to polish a double-winged stone arrowhead, which was the most used stone arrowhead in the tribe. Lang Jie used it a lot. Old Ku had also told Xiaofan the essentials of making stone arrowheads. The rest could only be learned through polishing, and old Ku would also point out some details to pay attention to. After a few days, old Ku didn't sit next to Xiaofan and watch him polish. He didn't need to say anything, because Xiaofan could already do it very well. Leaning on a wooden stick, old Ku took out a wooden box filled with all kinds of stone tools, big and small, and placed it outside the house. Inside were the stone tools Xiaofan had polished these days. Most of them were spearheads and arrowheads, and the style of the stone tools they polished was somewhat different from old Ku's. In the past few days, old Ku had changed his rules. In the afternoon, he didn't let people into the house. In the morning, he would take out a lot of finished stone tools and place them on the table. If anyone took a fancy to them, they could quickly exchange them. After noon, old Ku would pack up and enter the house. He wouldn't come out for the whole afternoon. Therefore, when they saw old Ku putting out the things at this time, some people gathered around. "Hey, old Ku, why are you putting things out at this time today?" "Hey, old Ku, these things aren't made by Xian, right?" Many people knew that Xiaofan was learning stone tools from old Ku, but no one was optimistic about it. Some people secretly discussed how long Xiaofan could last. Would he be like those people before him, who couldn't help but leave after a few days, or would he be forced out by old Ku? They didn't expect him to last until now. Looking at old Ku, he didn't seem to be angry. It was really strange. However, the person who said that the stone tools were made by Xiaofan laughed after saying it. The people who came with him also just laughed and didn't take it seriously. After all, in their opinion, that kid had only been learning from old Ku for a few days. It was absolutely impossible for him to make such a successful stone product. They were just joking about old Ku. This stone arrowhead is well polished. It's perfect for laying bows and setting traps. Hey, the barbs are well polished. I like them. A person squatted down and began to pick out the stone arrowheads he liked. Seeing that someone had already started, the others stopped joking around and started to pick the stoneware they liked. They were afraid that the good stuff would be taken away by someone else. After all, the stoneware made by old Ku was much better than the others. Hey, old Ku, did you change your style? The arrowheads didn't have such long barbs in the past. A warrior picked out a stone arrowhead and touched the wings on it. Ku, who was sitting there, just kept a straight face and didn't answer. The warriors who came to exchange their stone tools were already used to old Ku's behavior. They didn't expect old Ku to explain. It wasn't strange for a stone tool maker to change his style. Hunting consumed a lot of stone tools. Because many of them were disposable, unlike metals, they couldn't be reused. So the scrap rate was especially high. This also led to the warriors preparing a lot of stone tools before every hunting trip. The last hunting team had been out for almost 20 days. Generally speaking, the hunting team wouldn't go out for more than 20 days. Even if they were in trouble, they wouldn't go out for more than 30 days. After all, the warriors' families were still in the tribe. If they didn't come back, their families would starve. So, after some calculations, the hunting team that went out would be back soon. The other team was also preparing. They were just waiting for the people who went out to come back. Then they would hand over the tribe's affairs and set off for hunting. Of course, the more stone tools they had, the better. They will be back in these 2 days. I saw someone bring the wounded back in the morning. This time, 2 of them were seriously injured, but their lives weren't in danger. I heard that no one died. Someone said while picking. So, we are also going to set off. I have to go back and get more things to exchange with old Ku. Didn't you say 2 were injured? Who were they? The crowd began to talk again, but their hands didn't slow down. Every time they saw a stone tool, they would grab it tightly in their hands. Those who were slower than them could only regret that they didn't make the first move. If you want to exchange, then hurry up and get out. Old Ku waved his arm with a cold face. If they wanted to talk, they should go somewhere else. Xian was still polishing in the house. What if they disturbed him? In the eyes of the crowd, old Ku was too difficult to get along with. It seemed that he didn't care about anything except stone tools. He was also very fierce when he scolded people. But in fact, old Ku valued Xiaofan more than anyone else. When these people began to talk, old Ku was not happy and immediately drove them away. The crowd didn't get angry. They stopped talking and quickly went back to pick. When almost all the things were put on the table, no one came back. Old Ku picked up the remaining small stone tools and put them into the wooden box. He shook his head and whispered to himself, "Why don't I like these small stone tools? In fact, as long as they are used well, they are much more lethal than those big ones." When Xiaofan finished polishing for the day and dragged his tired body back, the hunting team that went out also came back before sunset. Chapter 36. In the cheers, the hunting team walked on the path of glory, leaving long shadows in the sunset. The strong warriors were carrying much bigger prey on their backs, like an ant carrying a quail egg. They carried some on their shoulders, carried some on their backs, and even dragged some with straw ropes. The harvest was plentiful, and it was truly a rewarding journey. It was said that no one in the hunting team was killed this time, only 2 were seriously injured. The injured ones were with the shaman, and their condition had stabilized. With the strong physique of the tribesmen, it wouldn't take long for them to be able to jump around again. After a whole afternoon of non-stop grinding, Xiaofan was too tired. After finding Lang Jie, Mai, and the others, he turned around and went back to the cabin. He didn't rush to greet them with cheers like the others. At the front of the team, Mao, who was obviously shorter than the others, was carrying 2 big wild boars on his back. He was very proud of himself. Listening to the praises from the crowd, he couldn't stop his mouth from grinning. It felt so good. He straightened his back again, and turned his head to look at the crowd, just in time to see the back of Mai and Caesar leaving. Because he was too tired, Xiaofan didn't have much energy either. Looking from the back, he did seem to be in a bad mood. He must have been defeated by me, Mao thought. Carrying 2 big wild boars, Mao was still thinking about how to defeat Xiaofan in the future when he joined the hunting team. After a night's rest, Xiaofan felt full of energy. Even the soreness in his muscles had disappeared, as if he didn't persist in grinding for so long yesterday. As usual, he picked stone cores in the morning, and went to old Ku's place in the afternoon. But today, old Ku gave Xiaofan half a day off, so that Xiaofan could have some rest. Looking at the results of his grinding these days, Xiaofan picked some stone cores and took them with him. Old Ku only took out half of the finished stoneware, and the other half was kept by old Ku for Xiaofan's own use. Therefore, Xiaofan still had a lot of stoneware in stock. Xiaofan used 2 net bags woven with straw rope to carry some of the stone tools he had selected. Then, he carried them up the mountain. When Xiaofan arrived, Lang Jie was still sleeping. After going out to hunt, when there was no shift, he would always sleep for 3 or 4 days. "What's the matter?" Lang Jie yawned, his drooping eyelids almost closing. "Oh, I just came to give you something. Go back to sleep." Xiaofan placed one of the net bags on the stone table in the room and planned to leave. Originally, he wanted to listen to Lang Jie talk about hunting, but now it seemed that he had to wait for a few days. "For me?" Although he was sleepy, Lang Jie was still very curious about what Xiaofan had brought. When the bag was opened and he saw the polished stone arrowheads inside, Lang Ga's squinted eyes suddenly widened. His eyes flashed as he took out an arrowhead and began to examine it carefully. Xiaofan made the wings on the arrowhead according to the size and shape Lang Jie was used to. Therefore, the barbs were longer than the others because Lang Jie was used to using them. If he changed it without permission, Lang Jie might not be used to it, so Xiaofan didn't add any other ideas. Lang Jie looked at the arrowheads in his hands and became more and more surprised. The arrowheads in front of him were very well polished, and the most important thing was that the wings were almost perfect. The wings of the arrowheads could play a role in balancing the flight of the arrowhead, allowing the arrowhead to hit the target more accurately. If the wings were slightly out of place, the hunting effect would be greatly reduced. In order to increase the lethality of the arrowheads, Lang Jie polished the wings of the arrowheads himself. The edges of the arrowheads were more prominent, the tips were sharp, and there were 2 long barbs. Lang Jie had always felt that only the arrowheads polished by himself were easy to use. The arrowheads polished by others, even his grandfather, might not be easy to use. But now, looking at the arrowheads in his hands, Lang Jie was very surprised. With just a glance and a weight, he knew that these arrowheads would be very easy to use. The arrowheads in his hands looked almost exactly the same as the arrowheads that Lang Jie polished himself. No, they weren't exactly the same. The arrowheads in front of him were polished more perfectly. Usually, when Lang Jie polished the arrowheads himself, because of the large demand, he didn't spend time polishing some details. But these arrowheads in front of him? "Hey, Xian, thank you, I like them very much. By the way, please thank old Ku for me. Thank him for the arrowheads he polished." In Lang Ga's opinion, these arrowheads were naturally polished by old Ku, and Xiaofan naturally asked for them from old Ku before sending them over. Lang Jie stretched out his thumb and touched the wings of the arrowhead. Tsk, the edges of the arrowheads were very well polished. As expected of a master's product. Xiaofan, who had just walked out of the door, turned back and smiled. "I'll help you pass on the message. By the way, I polished those arrowheads myself. You can see if they're good for you when you use them." Hearing Xiaofan's reply, Lang Jie, who was touching the arrowheads, froze. He raised his eyes and looked at Xiaofan in astonishment, the muscles on his face trembling violently. "Wait." Lang Jie strode in front of Xiaofan, holding the arrowhead in his hand. He stared at Xiaofan and said word by word, "You made this?" Xiaofan nodded. "Yes, it's passable, right?" "Passable?" Lang Jie stared at Xiaofan with bloodshot eyes. Even his breathing became heavy. If these were considered passable, then what was the point of what he was doing now? Stone slag? Xiaofan didn't quite understand what Lang Jie meant. He had some arrowheads given by Lang Ga. Because he had used them once, Lang Jie didn't want to take them out for hunting, but it would be a waste to throw them away, so he gave them to Xiaofan for training. When Lang Jie and the others first started training, they also used second-hand arrowheads, which was very common in the tribe. Xiaofan's arrowheads were made according to the ones given by Lang Ga. There were some flaws on the arrowheads, but it didn't affect their use. Xiaoxian always thought that the small flaws were caused by the wear and tear of the arrowheads. After seeing them, old Ku didn't comment on them. But for the arrowheads made by Xiaoxian himself, old Ku commented that they were passable. This was also the reason why Xiaoxian said they were passable. Lang Jie looked at Xiaoxian with a complicated expression. Maybe it was because he had a grandfather who was a stoneware maker. He also made stoneware himself and thought that he was quite talented in stoneware. Now that he had some success, even if he couldn't catch up with his grandfather, he would definitely surpass him in 10 years. Moreover, among his peers, his ability to make stoneware was above most, especially when it came to arrowheads. Almost no one in his generation could surpass him. But now, in front of him, there was a 10-year-old kid who had just awakened and learned stoneware for less than 30 days. The arrowheads he made were actually better than his own. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that this kind of stone tool could not be made with enough time and meticulous polishing. Moreover, the arrowheads in his hand were very smooth and did not have many stagnation points. It was possible that these arrowheads were all polished in a short period of time. Why did he change so much after coming back from a hunt? I'm only going out for 20 days, not 2 years. Thinking about how he gave Xiaoxian a batch of second-hand stoneware arrowheads full of flaws before he went hunting, Lang Ga's face turned red and he wanted to bang his head into the ground. Although he was usually thick-skinned, when it came to stoneware, he was deeply influenced by his grandfather. His views and thoughts were completely different from usual. Deep breaths. Deep breaths again. Lang Jie stretched out a trembling finger and pointed outside. You don't come out for 3 days. After saying that, Lang Jie put down the curtain and didn't sleep. He strode to the small room where he usually used to grind stoneware and began to work. In another room next to Lang Ga's room, an old man with a head full of white hair walked out. Although he was old, his body still looked healthy and healthy. It wasn't a problem for him to carry a stone that weighed 100 pounds. This man was Lang Ga's grandfather. The old man had just taken an afternoon nap and was chewing on a piece of jerky when he was about to go down the mountain to meet some friends. When he heard the sound of stoneware grinding, he thought that one of his sons was preparing stoneware for hunting. When he turned his head, he saw his grandson, who was supposed to be sleeping soundly in his room, appear in the stoneware room through the open window. The old man was so excited that he almost choked on the jerky. His eyes were as big as stone balls. He looked at Lang Jie as if he was looking at a rare ferocious beast in the forest. Holy shit! This little bastard, every time he came back from a hunt, he would be like a softie who couldn't get up without sleeping for 3 or 4 days. How strange. Xiaoxian, who had just been yelled at by Lang Jie, "Don't come out for 3 days," was a little confused. What was wrong with Lang Jie? Did he not wake up and have low blood pressure? Shaking his head, Xiaoxian carried another net bag and walked up the mountain. Mai's place was slightly higher. Chapter 37. As an intermediate totem warrior, Mai held an important position in the hunting team. He had a lot of work to do back in the tribe, so he was not as free as Lang Ga. When Xiaoxian arrived, Mai was assigning patrol tasks to 2 warriors. Xiaoxian waited for the 2 warriors to come out before he went in. Inside the house, Mai was processing the meat he brought back. He only did some preliminary processing during the hunt, so he had to chop them into small pieces and marinate them. He also had to sort them out for other uses. "You're here." Seeing Xiaoxian enter the house, Mai waved his hand and threw a piece of bloody meat the size of a winter melon to Xiaoxian. "Take it back and eat it. You're a totem warrior now, so you eat a lot. You'll get hungry during training." Many people would reduce their training time when they were short of food. After all, once a totemic warrior started training, they would consume more energy, so naturally, they would need to eat more. Especially for warriors like Xiaofan who had just awakened, it was the time for them to grow, so they could not lack food. "Thank you, Uncle Mai." Xiaofan took the meat and handed the net bag to Mai. "This is for you." Mai put down the stone axe and looked at the net bag curiously. "You made it yourself?" "Well, it's definitely not as good as yours, Uncle Mai. But it's still okay." Xiaofan scratched his head and said. Compared to Lang Ga's stone arrowheads, the ones Xiaofan gave Mai didn't have as many stone arrowheads. Instead, most of them were spearheads for throwing during hunting. After all, the two of them had different responsibilities in the hunting team, so the stone arrowheads they used were naturally different. Mai had heard from Lang Jie that Xiaofan was learning stone tools from old Ku. But it had not been long, so Mai did not expect to see many exquisite things. Xiaofan was thoughtful enough to send him something, so he did not want to discourage this kid. Mai smiled and pulled open the net bag, intending to say some words of encouragement. "Actually, you can't rush into crafting stone tools. It's already very good that you're able to do this. In the future," his voice came to an abrupt halt. Mai looked at the well-polished spearheads in the net bag and swallowed back the words of encouragement he was about to say. The sharpened spearhead was the same as Mai's usual spearhead. Its spine was slightly higher, and the blade of the spearhead was also very sharp. The spearhead's blade gathered into a sharp point, and there were no traces of it being beaten. Clearly, a lot of effort had been put into the sharpening. Unlike the spearheads used by many warriors, the spearheads Mai liked to use had grooves for drinking blood on both sides of the spine. Xiaofan also had grooves for drinking blood. Just like Lang Jie, Mai also gave Xiaofan a stone tool for training. It was a spear that he had used before. However, when he gave it out, he did not expect to receive such a gift in return. These, are you really polishing them yourself?" Mai looked at Xiaofan, and saw Xiaofan nodding. Mai then looked at the stone tools in his hands. He did not expect Xiaofan to have such a gift. In this case, even if Xiaofan could not improve his strength in the future, he would be able to live a peaceful life in the tribe. He would not have to starve. After being stunned for a while, Mai laughed. "Good. Very good." Unlike Lang Jie, Mai did not spend so much effort on crafting stone tools, nor did he care much about them. Therefore, when he saw Xiaofan's stone tools, he only admired them. After putting away the spearheads, Mai asked about Xiaofan's training during this period, and gave some suggestions. He did think highly of Xiaofan, but he also agreed that the newly awakened ones should train more. There was no need to rush to join the hunting team. Otherwise, they would be like Hoodlum, who was too eager for success. However, when the time came, they would make a lot of mistakes and become a burden. After thinking for a while, Mai reached out his hand and said to Xiaofan, "Punch my hand, and let me see your strength." After a totemic warrior's ability was improved, his strength would continue to increase. That was why Mai wanted to use this method to see Xiaofan's results during this period of training. However, he did not expect Xiaofan to improve much. After all, Xiaofan had spent most of his time making stone tools. "Okay." Xiaofan put aside the meat in his hand, and stretched his arms and legs. In fact, he did not know how different he was from the other kids, except for his special ability. He also did not know what level he was at now. It would be good for his future training if he could get some advice from Mai. Since he wanted to test his fist strength, he had to use his totemic power. Taking a deep breath, Xiaofan mobilized the totemic power in his body. Immediately, clear totemic patterns appeared on his face, and quickly spread from his face to his neck. Mai was satisfied to see Xiaofan mobilizing his totemic power so quickly. He was much better than the other kids who had been preparing for a long time. Xiaofan suddenly stomped on the ground with his right foot, and rushed towards Mai at a high speed. He punched Mai's hand. Bang! The fist hit the palm, but it was like a collision between rocks. Xiaoxian felt as if he had hit a hard steel wall, which was completely different from the rock he had hit in his training. Xiaoxian staggered back 2 steps, and took back his fist. He grinned and rubbed his fist. Actually, it wasn't just his fist that was hurting. His entire arm was aching. Sure enough, there was such a big difference between a newly awakened totemic warrior and an intermediate totemic warrior. Looking at Mai, he looked like he had just hit a piece of tofu, and his hand was not even red. Xiaoxian also noticed that the totemic patterns on Mai's body had indeed gone past his elbow, and some of them had even spread along his forearm. Unlike him, his totemic patterns had just gone past his shoulder. In fact, Mai was not so calm. He looked at Xiaoxian in surprise. Compared to the pain in his hand, he had seen the totemic patterns on Xiaoxian's shoulder, but now they had disappeared. He did not know if it was an illusion, but Xiaoxian's punch was indeed stronger than most of the newly awakened totemic warriors. Winter was over, and the weather was getting warmer. The temperature was rising day by day, and he had to train every day. For convenience, Xiaoxian was now wearing a sleeveless animal skin coat, so the totemic patterns on his shoulder were naturally exposed. Maybe Mai did not have old Ka's eyesight, but compared to most people, he was much better. Again. Use all your strength. Mai said to Xiaoxian. Seeing that Mai had other ideas, Xiaoxian did not hesitate. Taking a deep breath, Xiaoxian mobilized the totemic power in his body again. In his mind, the flames wrapped around the horns suddenly grew, and the totemic power was mobilized to the limit. Feeling the surging power flowing through every muscle and every bone, Xiaoxian's mental state reached its peak in an instant. After working on stone tools for so long, his precise control of the totemic power had shown its advantage. He was very familiar with the instantaneous accumulation of power, and he could feel it every day. Every time this happened, Xiaoxian would have a strong sense of confidence. At the same time, the flame patterns on Xiaoxian's body became abnormally bright, and he could almost feel the burning heat of the flames. The moment he exerted force on his leg, the ground trembled slightly. Whoosh! Before the punch arrived, the wind from the punch had already arrived. Although Xiaoxian was only a junior totem warrior who had just awakened, and he hadn't trained his strength to the extreme, the sudden explosion of his fist brought about an unparalleled momentum. Looking at the kid in front of him who only reached his waist, Mai's eyes widened slightly. Bang! A clear cracking sound could be heard. Xiaoxian suddenly felt a sharp pain in his entire arm, as if he was being roasted on a bonfire. The burning pain was endless. Mai's face even stiffened for a moment, but soon returned to normal. However, he was still shocked. He stared at Xiaoxian, and did not withdraw his outstretched hand for a long time. Xiaoxian, who was pushed back a few steps by the recoil, waved his arms and made a hissing sound. He didn't expect it to be so painful. Compared to the feeling of the last punch, the difference was not just a little bit. Xian. Mai said with some difficulty. Xiaoxian waved his arm, and looked at Mai. He was not worried about his arm. Even if it was broken, it would heal in a few days. This was the advantage of the tribesman's physique. You go back, and get ready. Hearing Mai's words, Xiaoxian wondered if Mai would tell him not to come out for 3 days, just like Lang Jie did. He continued to look at Mai, waiting for him to continue. Get ready, and go hunting with us next time. Huh? Chapter 38. Xiaoxian looked at Mai in surprise. He did not expect Mai to say something like that. Didn't they agree that he would only be allowed to come with them next time? Why did he change his mind? Was it because of the punch just now? Okay. Xiaoxian answered. Xiaoxian was more than willing to go out with the hunting team next time. The forest changed every day, and different things could be seen at different times. For example, there were flowers that only bloomed once a year, and plants that only bore fruit once a year. The earlier they went out, the more they could see. Otherwise, they would have to wait for another year to see the same thing again. Lang Jie and Gu had said that many plants in the forest were dangerous, and they needed to know how to identify them. However, they could only know when they saw them. Otherwise, they would not have the concept based on other people's descriptions. Besides, since Mai allowed Xiaoxian to come with them next time, he obviously recognized Xiaoxian's ability. As for the rest, Xiaoxian only needed to go back and prepare. At this time, someone came in to look for Mai. It was Tua, who they had met before. Knowing that they had something to discuss, Xiaoxian did not want to disturb them, so he left. "Uncle Mai, you go ahead. I will go back and prepare." "Thank you, Uncle Mai." After Xiaoxian left, Mai moved his stiff palms. He shook his shoulders and swung his arms slightly, which made a series of cracking sounds. Because of Xiaoxian's punch, several bones in his arms were dislocated. However, this shake pushed all the dislocated bones back to their original positions. Although his palms looked fine, Mai knew that there were injuries on his palms. He had underestimated that kid. Mai had planned to comfort and enlighten Xiaoxian so that he could focus on his training. He also planned to give some examples of hunting to Xiaoxian, so that he could take him out to hunt next time. However, after feeling Xiaoxian's punch, Mai changed his mind. "What did the kid say he was going to prepare?" Tua asked. "About the next hunting trip," Mai answered. Tua was a little dissatisfied. "Didn't he say that sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting firewood? I thought he was waiting for the next hunt. Did he come to beg you just now?" For the sake of the shaman, Tuo's attitude towards Xiaoxian was not bad. However, he did not want to give in when it came to hunting. The hunting that had just ended was an example. Fei's several serious mistakes during the hunting operation almost implicated the others. Mai shook his head. "He didn't mention it. I allowed it." "Why?" Tua was puzzled. The smile on Mai's face grew wider and wider. "Since the blade is almost polished, it's a waste of time to keep sharpening it. Whether it can be sharpened or not, it's impossible to keep cooped up in the tribe. We can only go out and train in the forest." After leaving Mai's residence, Xiaoxian walked briskly down the mountain. Every step he took was huge, but his movement was very small. It looked like he was just floating over the stones. After going down the mountain, Xiaoxian did not immediately go back to his cabin. Caesar went to help the children in the cave to dig out stone worms, so Xiaoxian was not worried. When he came to Old Ku's cabin and was about to shout, he saw the straw curtain at the door being lifted up. An old man with a head full of silver hair strode out. Looking at the old man's face, it was obvious that he was angry. His beard was almost sticking up. Seeing Xiaoxian standing at the door, the old man frowned and looked at Xiaoxian from head to toe. It seemed that he was questioning something. His eyes were like a stone knife that could not wait to cut Xiaoxian a few times. His beard trembled. It seemed that he wanted to say something, but in the end, he only left with a heavy humph. Then he turned around and left. Xiaoxian was confused. Was he a psychopath? Seeing Gu poking his head out at the door, Xiaoxian asked, "Who was that?" After making sure that the old man was far away, Gu laughed and said, "That was Lang Ga's grandfather." "That was Lang Ga's grandfather?" Just as Lang Jie said, he was a bad-tempered old man. Walking into the cabin, Xiaoxian told Old Ku that Mai allowed him to go hunting next time. Gu was surprised with his jaw wide open. Old Ku, on the other hand, seemed to have expected this. He replied with a calm face, and let Xiaoxian go into the inner room to polish the hunting stone tools. The stone tools used for hunting were more demanding and time-consuming than the stone tools used for training. Xiaofan had a lot of stone tools for training, but only a few for hunting. Half of them were given to old Ku to trade, and the other specially made ones were given to Lang Jie and Mai. Xiaofan only had 5 fingers left. Xiaofan did not say much. He took off his animal skin coat and went into the inner room. Gu looked at the straw curtain hanging there as a partition and smiled. Old Ku wanted to hide the girl and teach her by himself. Old Ku did not allow outsiders to enter the house, but there were always some people like Gu who would enter through the window. Of course, there were also some people that Old Ku could not stop, such as Lang Ga's grandfather. Old Ku wanted to prevent others from snatching Xiaofan away. "Hey, Old Ku, why do you think they allowed Xian to follow the team in advance?" Gu asked. Old Ku did not say anything. "Tch, if you don't want to answer, then don't answer." Gu walked inside and carefully lifted the straw curtain to look inside. He wanted to see what was different about Xiaofan compared to before. He could even make Mai, who had always been strict, let him go. After looking for a while, Gu walked back with his chin in his hand. He was shocked as if he saw a carnivore suddenly become a vegetarian. He. Before Gu could say what he had just seen, he saw Old Ku holding a white knife and sharpening it. The word "he" was stuck in his mouth. After a while, he stuttered and pointed at the knife that was being sharpened, and then at Old Ku. There were many marks on the body of this saber, and there were also many small gaps on the blade, which looked like saw teeth. This was caused by its previous use. The hilt that was installed in the early years was also broken, so it was simply removed. The part of the hilt that was exposed was a part that was integrated with the saber body. The original hilt that was installed on this part of the saber. Ge's eyes were glued to the knife, and he could not return to his senses for a long time. He had already guessed what Old Ku wanted to do. It was also because of this that he was surprised. This was even more shocking than seeing Xiaofan's totem pattern. When Xiaofan finished sharpening the stone core and walked out, Old Ku was installing the handle on the knife that had already been sharpened. The handle was installed with a kind of resin, which was mixed and melted. Xiaofan had used this method before. It felt good, much better than wood or rope. "Wait for a moment. You can take it back when the handle is done," Old Ku said to Xiaofan, who was about to leave. Xiaofan looked at the knife. The knife was wide, and the blade was about half a meter long. The back of the knife was about a finger thick. It was much thicker than many of the stone knives that Xiaofan had made. Looking at Ge's expression, Xiaofan knew that this knife was extraordinary. He had never touched the knife, so he could not say anything. However, as he looked at it, he felt a heavy chill coming from the knife, as if it wanted to press people into the ground. "What is this?" Xiaofan was puzzled. "This is a knife made from the teeth of a ground shell." Gu looked at the knife, his face full of reluctance. He wanted to snatch it and hold it in his arms. This knife had not appeared in front of anyone since Old Ku's leg was broken. He had begged Old Ku countless times before, but Old Ku never agreed. He was not even willing to take it out to see. But now, Old Ku was going to give this knife, which symbolized his best days, to Xiaofan. Gu was envious, but he also knew that in his current situation, he could only be envious. There was no need to think about anything else. Ground shell? It was a ground shell. Even though Xiaofan had not seen it with his own eyes, he had heard from Lang Jie that it was a giant ferocious beast that lived underground. When hunting, if you met a ground shell, don't even think about throwing stone spears at it. The only thing you could do was to run away. No one wanted to fight a ground shell, because they could not win. He had heard so many hunting stories from Lang Jie, but he had never heard of a hunting team fighting against a ground shell. When Old Ku handed the knife to Xiaofan and pushed him out of the door, Gu was still craning his neck to look around. His eyes were glued to the knife. Xiaofan stood outside the house for a long time with the knife in his arms. It was not obvious, but it weighed at least 200 pounds. Chapter 39. Xiaofan placed the saber that old Ku had given him on the newly made stone table in the house. Caesar stared at the saber on the table from 2 meters away and bared its teeth. Ever since it had sniffed the saber at a close distance, it had become very cautious. Its eyes were full of vigilance, and it kept a certain distance from the saber. Xiaofan reached out and touched the saber, which was not as cold as the stone. After dozens of years, the strong murderous aura on the saber had settled down. After many rounds of polishing, the saber had become a little smaller due to wear and tear. The blade, which was originally full of small nicks, had become smooth and sharp after being polished again. Sighing softly, Xiaofan carefully put on the saber with a leather sheath. Old Ku had given him his precious saber, and he wasn't afraid that he would lose it. Putting the saber aside, Xiaofan took a slate. The slate was made of low-grade stone, and Xiaofan had specially brought it back to use as a writing board. He listed out the number of stone tools he planned to make and wrote them down on the slate. In addition to spearheads and stone arrowheads, Xiaofan also planned to make a few stone balls to bring along. When the time came, he could use the stone ropes or beast-tripping ropes. For 3 consecutive days, Xiaofan spent time at Old Ku's place, polishing stone tools and listening to Old Ku talk about hunting. Old Ku didn't talk about his glorious past, and Xiaofan didn't ask. When Old Ku wanted to talk about it, he would. After finishing polishing the stone tools, Old Ku asked Xiaofan, "Do you know why people who live on the mountainside rarely go fishing?" Xiaofan had always wondered about this question. Since everyone knew that there were fish in the river, why were there still so many people willing to risk their lives to hunt? Logically speaking, fishing was so easy. As long as one mastered the technique, it wouldn't take much effort. Moreover, as far as Xiaofan knew, not everyone who lived on the mountainside had enough food. But in fact, Xiaofan had only seen a few elderly people with limited mobility going down the mountain to join in the fishing. He didn't see any children on the mountain participating in the fishing. As for the soldiers, there was no need to mention them. Other than those who were responsible for guarding the river bank, he basically didn't see anyone snatching fish from the people of the Mountain Foot district. Old Ku raised his head and looked out the window. They could see the mountains in the distance from that direction. Because of the ancestral teachings. Old Ku said, 900 years ago, the chief and the shaman left a warning at the same time. As long as you are a healthy warrior, you must go out and participate in hunting. Even when there is enough food, you must not indulge in comfort or slack off. I must do everything possible to improve myself. It wasn't easy for a totemic warrior to improve. When they went out to hunt, they had to go through many life and death struggles before they could be promoted from a beginner totemic warrior to an intermediate totemic warrior. It was even more difficult to improve further. People like Mai and the others were almost mentally prepared to stay in the wilderness every time they went out to hunt. On the whole mountain, the people who lived in the Mountain Foot district are the weakest in terms of overall strength. At the same time, it also showed that these people's mentality was relatively lazy. But even so, Xiaofan didn't see any reluctance on anyone's face every time they went out to hunt. Everyone was very active, even if they could now catch enough fish. Many warriors on the mountain didn't let their children go down the mountain to fish, probably because they didn't want their children to form the idea that getting food is actually very easy. From the brainwashing teachings passed down from generation to generation, they only needed to know that if they wanted food, they had to go into dangerous places and fight with the ferocious beasts in the mountains. Only with pressure would there be motivation to improve. A warrior who hasn't been tested by hunting is not a real warrior. Old Ku concluded. It sounded cruel, but it was understandable. Thousands of years of persistence couldn't be changed by a fishing incident. They believed that it was easy to slack off when fishing, so they would continue to persevere. Not to mention, the chief and the shaman had already made a development plan a long time ago. There was nothing to do with fish, and the focus was on the distant mountains. Xiaofan remembered the murals on the wall of the stone room in the cave, and the last sentence, "One day, we will return to the old land. The glory is still there, and the fire of Yanjiao will never be extinguished." After leaving Ku's place and returning to his cabin, Xiaofan gently counted the stone tools he made today, and classified them together with the stone tools he made a few days ago. The stone arrowheads made by Xiaofan himself were different from those made by Lang Ga. The arrowheads were more streamlined, the wings were striped, and the tips were slightly straighter. In addition, he also made some three-winged stone arrowheads. Different from the stone tools used for training, the stone tools prepared for hunting were engraved with Xiaofan's name. This was something that every hunting warrior in the tribe would do. After sorting out the stone tools, Xiaofan turned back and saw Caesar squatting next to him, yawning. His ears drooped listlessly, and he looked like a lazy dog lying in front of his house. No wonder Lang Jie and the others didn't look at Caesar as prey, but directly ignored him. Caesar wasn't a challenge at all, and they weren't interested in him. However, when the hunting team went out for about 20 days, what would Caesar do? It was impossible for him to stay at home, and Xiaofan didn't feel at ease if no one looked after him. Should he send him to the mountain and ask the shaman for help? No, the old faker couldn't take care of anyone when he was busy. Xiaofan even thought about sending Caesar to the cave, but in the end, he gave up the idea. If he was sent to the cave, Caesar would do whatever he wanted, and those kids wouldn't be able to control him at all. After thinking of several candidates, Xiaofan decided to let old Ku keep an eye on him. Besides, Caesar would be more obedient in old Ku's place. Caesar had been making stone tools in old Ku's place for a long time, so he was familiar with the place. Besides, Xiaofan also believed that old Ku could take good care of Caesar. Therefore, on the third day after the hunting team came back, those who stayed behind were ready to set off. Xiaofan took old Ku's knife and the stone tools he made, and took a detour to old Ku's house. He left Caesar at old Ku's place, and left a lot of fish and meat. Caesar had grown bigger, and his appetite was not small. "Stay here and guard the door. I'll pick you up when I come back." When he was walking up the mountain with the equipment on his back, Xiaofan could still hear Caesar's moans, which sounded quite pitiful. He was becoming more and more like a dog. According to the previous agreement with Lang Jie, Xiaofan would go to Lang Jie first when he reached the mountainside, and then Lang Jie would take him up the mountain. Before the hunting team set off, there was a mobilization meeting. Xiaofan did not know many of the procedures, so he had to be guided by someone, or else it would be easy to make mistakes. When Xiaofan arrived, Lang Jie was already waiting at the door, with several big animal skin bags and net bags full of tools. "Let's go." Lang Jie walked in front with the equipment on his back. When he followed Lang Jie up the mountain, many people saw Xiaofan and were surprised. They did not expect that Xiaofan would be able to go hunting with them this time. "Is Fei not going?" Xiaofan asked Lang Ga. Xiaofan saw Fei's figure just now, but he did not bring any equipment, nor did he want to go up the mountain. He looked at Xiaofan angrily. "Him?" Lang Jie lowered his voice. During the last hunting trip, he was disobedient and made a mess. This time, Mai and the others did not let Fei go with them. They told him to stay at home and reflect. "We'll talk about it next time. Anyway, don't think about it this time. So Xian, when you go hunting with the hunting team, you must listen to them." "Got it," Xiaofan replied. On the way, they met Ong and a few others who had a good relationship with Lang Jie, so they went up the mountain together. The mobilization meeting was held at the same place as last time, but this time the whole fire pit was not lit. The shaman was wearing a gray cloak, standing by the fire pit with a walking stick in his hand. He was talking with Chief Ao. When Xiaoxian looked over there, the shaman also looked over. When he saw Xiaoxian, he was stunned. Obviously, he remembered Xiaoxian this time, and did not expect that Xiaoxian would join this hunting mission. Chapter 40. Although confused, the shaman did not ask, but continued with his work. It was not like the scene of 1,000 people worshipping the marquis. Every time there were only about 200 people in the hunting team. The wounded from the previous hunting team would stay in the tribe to recuperate, and those who had to take care of others, were not in good condition, or had other things to do would not be included in the hunting team. Therefore, even if they were all in the same hunting team, the number of people in each hunting team was not always the same. After Lang Jie and the others entered the hunting ground, they consciously stood in their usual positions, and Xiaoxian stood beside them. At the front of the team were several important figures in the hunting team, more than 10 of them, including Mai. The shaman stood beside the fire pit, with a stone bowl in his hand. In the stone bowl, there were some dark green pigments extracted from plants. One by one, the warriors walked over and asked the shaman to draw patterns on their faces. The patterns were similar to the shape of the totem. The shaman was murmuring something while drawing, but Xiaoxian could not hear it clearly. Or perhaps, even if he heard it, he would not understand what it meant. Not everyone in the hunting team could have their faces painted by the shaman. Only the important figures in the hunting team were qualified to have their faces painted by the shaman. At this moment, they looked very serious, as if they were performing some kind of sacred ceremony. Looking at Lang Jie and the others, their eyes were full of envy. They were probably thinking that one day they could stand in front of the team and receive the shaman's blessing before the hunting team set off. Although he had other thoughts, Xiaoxian's face was still as serious as the others, with a little bit of envy. When the 10 or so warriors finished painting and returned to the hunting ground, the solemn atmosphere suddenly relaxed. Under the lead of the chief, they began to sing the hunting song. Unfortunately, Xiaoxian did not know how to sing at all. Xiaoxian had heard the hunting song several times, but he could not master it. He also did not know that the hunting team had to sing it together before the hunting team set off. Damn, it was like not knowing how to sing the national anthem at the flag-raising ceremony. It would be so embarrassing if he said it out loud. But the problem was that in the tribe, the song of hunting was usually taught by parents and elders. Xiaoxian came from the cave, and Xinz was not an original, so he had never paid attention to this. Lang Jie and the others also did not think about this aspect, so they all neglected it. However, Xiaoxian was not a real child after all. He did not know how to play the song of hunting, but he knew how to make up the numbers. Xiaoxian's expression didn't change. He stood there calmly, his mouth opening and closing, but he didn't make a sound. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to tell that he was different from the crowd. Since the beginning of the world, our ancestors have been here. When the tribe rose, hunting was the priority. As the spring warmed up, the ice and snow melted. Birds and beasts jumped happily. Birds chirped and beasts roared. Hunters went far away. At first, Xiaoxian thought that the song of hunting would be over after a few lines, but as he waited, he realized that the song was really fucking long. It was like a story, from hunting in spring, to summer, to autumn, and finally ending in winter. Not only was it long, but it also had a fucking tragic ending. It was as if they were going to die. He wondered which master in the tribe wrote this song. Although the song talked a lot about hunting, and warned everyone that hunting in winter was dangerous and they had to be cautious when going out, Xiaoxian didn't feel that it was inspiring. However, the people present were all red in the face and neck, as if they were on steroids. They even sang the totem patterns on their bodies. They couldn't wait to tear apart ferocious beasts on the spot to vent their excitement. Xiaoxian really couldn't understand the mentality of these people. Perhaps, this was the difference between outsiders and natives. When Xiaoxian was singing with his mouth open, the shaman glanced at him several times. Xiaoxian knew, but he still didn't look away. He followed the example of Lang Jie and the others. When others were excited, he was also excited. When others roared with their spears, he also roared with his spear. Didn't Lang Jie say that no matter what he did, Xiaoxian would not make any mistakes? Standing by the fire pit, the shaman's old face twitched as he watched. Of course, he could see that Xiaoxian didn't know how to sing the Song of Hunting, but he didn't expect that Xiaoxian could be so thick-skinned. If it were other kids, they would have been terrified. After singing the Song of Hunting, Xiaoxian felt that the food he ate in the morning was almost used up. Since the morale had been boosted, the chief didn't say anything more. He asked the team leader to lead the team and set off immediately. There was a time plan for going out hunting, or there would be more trouble if they missed the timing. Xiaoxian moved his feet and followed Lang Ga, feeling someone was looking at him. Xiaoxian looked over. It was Mao. Mao was surprised. He did not expect that after Fei's accident in the last hunting mission, they would still allow the newly awakened warriors to join the team in advance. In fact, even the few kids who performed well in the last hunting mission might not be allowed to join the team this time. Obviously, Mao didn't consider himself as one of the newly awakened warriors. Xiaoxian glanced at him and ignored him. In case he made any mistakes, he had to follow Lang Jie closely. How could he have time to stare at that little kid? The hunting team walked down from the top of the mountain. People gathered on both sides of the path of glory to see them off. In this team, only Mao and Xiaoxian were among the newly awakened warriors this year. Therefore, the two of them were very conspicuous. Many people on the mountain were not familiar with Xiaoxian. When they saw the kid walking in the team, they realized that the kid in front of them was the one who was awakened in advance during the ritual ceremony. Once again, Xiaoxian made his presence known. Even those who didn't remember him last time remembered him. If he could follow the team, he must have the ability to do so. The tribe appreciated people with ability very much. As they walked down the mountain, they met more and more familiar faces. They waved their fists at Xiaoxian, not because they wanted to beat him, but because they wanted to encourage Xiaoxian. To Xiaoxian's surprise, the kids in the orphan cave also gathered by the path of glory and joined the team to see them off. They waved their little fists at Xiaoxian with envy in their eyes. At least they had a conscience. He didn't help them for nothing. Xiaoxian thought. Xiaoxian also saw Sai behind the crowd. Sai was carried here by his father. He planned to sleep a little longer in the early morning, but he was carried here to see the hunting team off. He was looking at the passing warriors carelessly, but suddenly he stopped yawning and stared at Xiaoxian and the team with his eyes wide open. Then he turned his head stiffly to look at his father. As expected, when Sai's father saw Xiaoxian in the team, he narrowed his eyes and tightened his grip on Sai's hand. He was thinking about how to give Sai more training tasks. Walking down the path of glory, the hunting team sped up. The voices of the crowd gradually faded away until they could no longer be heard. Xiaoxian carried his equipment and followed closely behind Lang Ga. They were not completely out of the patrol area of the tribe. There was a small piece of flat land in front of them. Once they got out of the flat land, they would be out of the territory of the tribe. Running on the thick grass, Xiaoxian looked up at the forest on the other side of the flat land. Clouds and mist rose up like steam, hanging in the air and covering a large part of the forest below. It looked oppressive and heavy. A sharp mountain peak showed a corner above the clouds and mist, like a black eye, overlooking the living beings below. Before entering the forest, they had already felt the heaviness as if it was going to bury them alive. Before entering the forest, there was a short rest time, and the leaders would assign tasks. Xiaoxian took the opportunity to ask Lang Jie, who was arranging the ground bao, "What should I do later?" "You don't have to think about other things," Lang Jie smiled and said, "just don't fall behind." Xiao Xuanzi's hunting trip began. "It's a new week, please recommend me." Chapter 41. After a short rest, the team leader led 40 warriors into the forest, while the others waited here. The rest of the warriors were divided into 5 groups. According to the original plan, they would enter the hunting areas separately in a fan shape, instead of gathering together. Xiaoxian was listening to Lang Ga's words, and when he looked up, he saw Mai and Mao coming over. "That kid didn't follow us last time. Why is he here this time? Does he want to change the route?" Ang whispered to his companions. "I just saw Mao go to find the team leader, and then Mai was called over," said Kuei, who had a good relationship with Lang Jie, and Ang Kuei was only a few years older than Xiaoxian, but after the awakening, he became taller. Now he looked not much shorter than Lang Jie and the others. Lang Jie and Ang both curled their lips. Xiaoxian knew it in his heart, because he heard Lang Jie and the others talk in private. The team leader of the hunting group was Mao's father. There were 2 reasons why Mao was able to join the hunting team. First, he was indeed capable, and he was indeed stronger than most of the other kids who were awakened in the same batch. His performance in the last hunting mission was also very good. The other reason was that he was ordered to join the hunting team by the team leader. Considering these 2 reasons, no one in the team had any objection. Obviously, it was Mao's idea to join their group this time, and the team leader had agreed. "Xian, Mao and you awakened in the same batch, and you two are about the same age. But Mao has more hunting experience than you, so you two should communicate more," Mai said. "Okay." Xiaoxian didn't show any displeasure, because he was not qualified to raise any objection. Out of Xiaoxian's expectation, Mao did not show his usual arrogance of, "I am the best in the world," nor did he look at Xiaoxian provocatively. Instead, he behaved himself and listened to Mai's plan carefully. From this point of view, he was smarter than Fei. After a while, the sound of a wooden whistle came from the forest in the distance. The whistle sounded like the chirping of a bird, but it also sounded like the cry of a deer. In this forest, it was not considered abrupt. That was the signal sent by the advance group, which meant that there were no ferocious beasts in front of them that were beyond the abilities of the hunting team, and there was nothing unusual compared to the previous hunting teams. The following teams could continue. The advance team would send out the news after the initial investigation, but they would not wait for the following teams to hunt together. They were considered people from the first level, so their hunting area was naturally different from the teams led by Mai and the others. Tua and Kiki, whom Xiaoxian knew, were both in the advance group. "Alright, let's go." Mai called out to the rest of the team, "Same old rules, we have to get to the other side of the mountain before sunset." Xiaoxian looked at the mountain that the mic was pointing at. The mountain was huge and tall. This would have been impossible in his previous life, but in this world, it seemed to have become a habit. The other hunting teams also had their own hunting routes. Some of them did not go over the mountain, but took a detour and went in other directions. Stepping into the dense forest, the team of about 30 people, each carrying a lot of things, walked through the forest, but did not make much noise. Above them, numerous ancient trees were clustered together, and their branches and wide leaves almost covered the entire sky. Below the trees, there were many unknown shrubs, and in the places where the shrubs did not gather, there were some ancient trees with their well-developed roots protruding from the ground. Figures jumped from the ground to the tree trunks, and nimbly jumped on the branches. The 30 people jumped one by one, but the branches only shook slightly. The rustling of the leaves did not attract the attention of other creatures in the forest. Xiaofan followed the people in front of him, jumping from the ground to the branches, and then from the branches to the huge vines. The huge vines, which were several meters thick, were wrapped around the ancient trees. Many places on the vines were covered with moss. The moist air made the moss slippery, and one could easily fall down if they stepped on it. However, as long as they were steady, it was also a good slide. Stepping on the vines, they slid quickly. Their noses were filled with the fresh smell of plants, mixed with the fragrance of flowers. In addition, as the temperature rose, water vapor rose with the smell of all kinds of creatures living in the forest. This was the smell of the primitive forest. It was full of vitality, and also smelled danger and excitement. It made people feel as if all the hair on their bodies were trembling with nervousness. A flat-shaped insect the size of a millstone was lying on a vine in front of him. There were 3 rows of patterns on its body that looked like eyes. As the insect wriggled, the 3 rows of patterns on its back flashed. It looked like the eyes of some kind of creature that was scanning its surroundings. The hunting team did not slow down because of the obstacle in front of them. Xiaofan did not hear any strange sounds, and saw the insect being peeled off from the vines and thrown down. Whoosh! A big bird flew under the vines, so fast that it was almost impossible to see clearly. And the insect that was falling down was picked up by the bird that had just flown by. As they moved forward, the light flickered. The vines arched into a high arc, and then fell down into the dense forest. On a thick branch above, there was a big colorful snake, as thick as a bucket, coiled around it. However, in this forest, it was nothing. No one knew if the snake was full or not, but it looked a little lazy. When the hunting team slid past the vines under the branches, it raised its head and looked down, spitting out its forked tongue. Its emotionless eyes stared at the people passing by below. Xiaofan felt the cold eyes of the snake above him, and followed Lang Jie closely. Since the people in front of him did not care about the snake above, he did not need to do anything. In terms of experience, Xiaofan was just a rookie. He knew when to take action, and when to hold back. He just needed to learn from Xiaofan. Xiaofan was now in the middle of the team, and there were other warriors behind him. The warriors in the back thought that since it was Xiaofan's first time following the team, they would help him if he could not keep up, or if he slipped or missed a step. But unexpectedly, Xiaofan could keep up with the team, and did not make any mistakes. On the way, Xiaofan saw a lot of prey, such as huge bears and unknown creatures, and small beasts running between the bushes. But the hunting team did not slow down to take a look at those beasts, and just walked towards the mountain that Mai had pointed out. The closer they got to the mountain, the more the plants changed. The towering ancient trees became sparser, and the hunting team stopped walking on the trees. Seeing that Lang Jie and the others in front of them slowed down, Xiaofan slowed down as well. Mai made a gesture to the warriors behind him, and 7 or 8 warriors in the team spread out to check if there were any dangerous ferocious beasts nearby. After making sure it was safe for the time being, Mai asked the hunting team to take a rest. The team changed their formation, and spread out a little. They did not just stand there, but prepared the tools in their hands. Tired? I guess. Lang Jie was playing with the ground bow, and was about to ask Xiaofan if he was tired. If he was tired, he could eat something and drink some water to replenish his strength. There was no need to be too much pressure. After all, they had to keep running from the edge of the forest to here, and they had to concentrate to avoid making any mistakes. They would be physically and mentally exhausted if they were nervous. For the newly awakened warriors, it was indeed too much for them. Even Mao, who was recognized as the best among the newly awakened warriors this year, was a little out of breath. But now, looking at Xiaofan, Lang Jie could not finish his sentence. Xiaofan seemed to be fine. Not only was he not out of breath, he even had the mind to pay attention to the tree fox on the tree next to him. Chapter 42. It was Xiaoxian's first time seeing a small animal called a tree civet. It was about the size of an adult's palm, and its gray fur was mixed with brown stripes. It had big black eyes on its furry round head, and its eyes were especially innocent when it looked at people. Its ears were slightly lowered as it crouched on a 10-meter-high branch, hugging the tree trunk and looking down at the people below. "Don't look at it, that little thing doesn't taste good," Lang Jie said to Xiaoxian in a low voice. They were resting here and didn't forbid them from talking, but they all kept their voices low. Generally speaking, the warriors in the tribe weren't picky about the taste of their food. They would eat anything that didn't taste good, as long as it could replenish their energy. However, if it was rated as not tasty, then it wasn't just a matter of tasting bad. There might be other adverse effects on the body. "Aren't they afraid of people?" Xiaoxian asked in a low voice. Actually, many wild beasts don't show fear when they see a human for the first time. Instead, they show curiosity. But if you show a little bit of killing intent, then it's different. While speaking, Lang Jie raised his bow and aimed at the tree civet on the tree. The tree civet, which looked especially innocent and harmless, suddenly had a murderous look in its eyes. Its mouth, which hadn't been open before, was now wide open. Xiaoxian could see the sharp teeth in its mouth. Lang Jie didn't shoot at the tree civet, but lowered his hand, no longer aiming at it. "It doesn't taste good with less meat, and its cry is also unpleasant," Lang Jie said and went back to loading his ground bow, checking if there was any damage. After Lang Jie left, the tree civet on the tree returned to its original appearance. A finger-long flying insect flew over and flapped its wings. The surface of its body was covered in a layer of fine scales that reflected the sunlight and flickered. One moment it would appear in one place and the next moment, it would appear in another place. They flew extremely fast in the air and could change positions in an instant. Whoosh! The tree civet waved its arms, as if it had already predicted where the flying insect would fly next. It stretched out its claws and clawed at the insect. In the blink of an eye, the flying insect was trapped between the tree fox's claws. Xiaoxian watched as the tree civet twisted the flying insect and broke its wings. Then, like a deep-fried dough stick, it ate the flying insect in one bite. As it chewed, it stared at Xiaoxian who was under the tree. When only the tail was left, the tree fox stopped gnawing. It looked at the remains on its claws and then looked at Xiaoxian who was under the tree. Then, it threw the tail towards Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian sensed the insect carcass being thrown at him at high speed. He moved half a step and dodged it just in time. "What the hell?" The tree civet on the tree began to bark. Xiaoxian thought that the tree civet was dissatisfied because he avoided it, but he caught a glimpse of Ong moving not far away. He then looked at the tree civet on the tree and saw that it had already run away, as if it was avoiding something. Ong ran in the opposite direction of the tree civet, and climbed up a tree nimbly. On his back, he carried 5 short spears, which were half the length of the ones he usually used. They could be used as javelins. The rest of the hunting group quieted down and slowed down their breathing. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, it would have been hard to imagine that there were so many people here. Ong seemed to have seen something. He quickly and quietly pulled out a short spear and was about to throw it. But before he threw it out, he stopped and made a gesture to Mai thought for a while, and waved his hand to ask Ong to come back. Ong looked regretful, and went back to the hunting group after climbing down the tree. At the same time, the hunting group hid behind the protruding stones and trees. Xiaoxian followed suit. After 2 breaths, Xiaoxian saw something that looked like a fox jumping out of the bushes. It looked around, and then ran away in one direction. Lang Jie signaled Xiaoxian to continue to wait. After a while, Xiaoxian heard a rustling sound. It was the sound of a creature moving and rubbing against the branches. A creature about 7 meters tall slowly appeared. It had brown fur, 4 thick limbs, and a thick and powerful tail behind it. It looked a little fierce, but looking at its slow and heavy body, it looked a little lazy. It sniffed with its nose, and walked to a few trees. It stood on its hind legs, with its strong tail behind its back, forming a tripod with its feet. After standing up, it exposed its front claws, which were like sickles, and hooked the trees in front of it. It easily cut off branches and leaves from the trees, as if it was cutting wheat. It was an animal that ate leaves as its main food. But judging from Mai's behavior, Xiaofan also knew that this big guy was not easy to deal with. Thinking back to the hunting stories he had heard before, this big guy in front of him should be a giant-clawed beast. In Xiaofan's eyes, this giant-clawed beast was already very big, but in fact, this one was not yet an adult. An adult giant-clawed beast was even bigger. Moreover, giant-clawed beasts only looked heavy and lazy, but when they were threatened, they reacted quickly. Their huge claws could easily uproot trees. In fact, giant-clawed beasts were also on the hunting list of the hunting team, but Mai did not send anyone to hunt them now. The trees were not big, and the giant-clawed beast quickly ate up most of the leaves on the trees. It lost interest in the rest of the leaves and continued to lazily walk on the ground. It moved its heavy body and left. After it left, Mai and the others continued to climb up the mountain. On the way up the mountain, Lang Jie checked a few traps he had set before. There were a few poor guys who had fallen into the traps not long ago, and were still alive. They had been dragged out and killed by the warriors of the hunting group. The trap wasn't big, so it only caught small prey. Lang Jie taught Xiaofan his experience while fixing the devices in the traps. Pointing at the warriors who were dealing with the prey, Lang Jie said to Xiaofan, "After you catch the prey, you have to check whether they are sick or not. Like the one we caught just now, its eyes had changed color, and its body was bald. When the meat was cut open, the blood had a strange smell. Even if that prey is still alive, it won't live long. If we eat it, we will end up the same as it." The warriors who were in charge of dealing with the prey had neatly skinned it, cut out its internal organs, and packed them into pieces. They even smeared some grass juice on the bags, probably to cover the smell. Mai led the hunting team to climb up the mountain, so they did not hunt many large beasts. The environment at the top of the mountain was not as mild as below. The snowy peak was shining under Yangguang's gaze, and they could clearly see the large basin on the other side of the mountain. Finally, before the sun set, the hunting team climbed over the mountain and arrived at a cave on the mountainside. This was the hunting team's stronghold, and they would spend the night here. With a cave to spend the night, it was naturally easier. After a tense journey, they could finally rest, and the warriors relaxed a little. There used to be a cave bear living in this cave. Later, our hunting team killed that cave bear, so we took over this place. Lang Jie told Xiaofan about the origin of this cave. "Oh right, Lang Jie, what kind of trouble did Hoodlum get himself into during the last hunting mission?" Xiaofan asked. The smile on Lang Ga's face suddenly disappeared, and he sighed. He leaned closer to Xiaofan and complained in a low voice, "That little bastard could have gotten himself into any trouble, but why did he have to get himself into trouble with the thorn-black wind?" The thorn-black wind did not refer to any kind of wild beast, but was a general term used by the people in the tribe for those predators who liked to lurk. That was why they usually called them XX Black Wind, and thorn-black wind was one of them. After the sun set, the temperature began to drop. The entrance of the cave was blocked by a huge rock, and the cold wind poured in through the gap. But there were many people in the cave, so it was still warm. If he looked outside the cave, Xiaofan could see the 2 crescent moons gradually appearing in the night sky. Lang Jie and the others said that tomorrow's weather would be good. Outside the cave, in the quiet forest at night, on the seemingly calm basin, nocturnal beasts began to become active. In a small pond at the foot of the mountain, the calm surface of the water began to ripple, and a huge body quietly emerged from the water, crawling out of the pond. Outside the pond, several nocturnal beasts who were drinking water had already fled for their lives. The giant beast did not rush to catch up with those small prey, but stood by the pond, waiting for the water to drip off its body and dry it. Even the moonlight could not reflect any light on its body. At this time, the giant beast began to move, and its huge body quickly blended into the night. Chapter 43. At dawn, after a night's rest, the people in the cave had recovered their energy and were counting the equipment they were going to bring out later. They brought a lot of stone tools from the tribe. There were some spare stone tools in the cave, but they couldn't be fully equipped when hunting, so they only needed to bring some. Xiaofan brought a long spear and 3 short spears on his back. He also brought the stone knife that old Ku gave him. Compared to the others, Xiaofan didn't bring much. It was his first time participating in a hunt, so the first thing he needed to do was to adapt and observe. After eating something, Mai pushed away the boulder that blocked the entrance of the cave. The sun hadn't completely risen yet, and the wind outside blew into the cave with cool moisture, refreshing everyone. The place where the cave was located was relatively remote. Not far ahead was a steep slope. If they rolled down from here, they would probably roll directly to the foot of the mountain. There weren't any trees around, nor were there any animals. Walking out of the cave, Xiaofan could see the mountain peak surrounded by clouds in the distance, as well as the basin at the foot of the mountain. Ignoring the threatening ferocious beasts hiding in the basin, this forest was still very beautiful. Before hunting, you need to understand the prey's living patterns. Small prey like rabbits usually don't come out during the day. Most of them come out at night to look for food. Lang Jie said to Xiaofan as they went down the mountain. He pointed out to Xiaofan several gnawing marks on the grass and leaves, which were left by the rabbits and other animals that were active at night. Wild goats usually don't live near this mountain. They are only found in the mountains over there, but sometimes you can see them here. In winter, they usually come out during the day to look for food. In summer, they come out more in the morning and at night, and hide in the valley to rest during the day. I'll show you when we cross the basin in a few days. There are also some small prey that like to move around the edge of the forest. During the day, they usually hide in the bushes and under the trees on the mountainside. They only come out to look for food in the morning and at dusk. Xiaofan listened carefully to Lang Ga's words and memorized them in his mind. This was the knowledge that he had to know to survive in this place. Only by understanding the living habits of the prey could they be targeted and increase their efficiency. In addition, when looking for prey, you can first carefully check the traces, such as fresh scratches on the trees, clear footprints on the ground, and so on, which means that prey has been here recently. Generally speaking, as long as you don't wantonly destroy the surrounding forest environment, the beasts may still follow the same old path. Once they feel that the prey has seen you, you can hold your breath and not move. Just like the previous tree civet, it is likely that it is also the first time they have seen a human, and their curiosity will be greater than their fear. By the way, for warriors like you who have just awakened, you don't have enough power yet. Try to avoid those large beasts, especially ferocious beasts. Otherwise, you will become their prey. As he spoke, Lang Jie paused. He carefully looked at the marks on the ground and then at the grass beside him. A wild boar came here. Lang Jie went over to Mai and discussed with him, there's a small wild boar nearby. Since we haven't entered the central hunting area yet, I'll bring Xian and the rest over there for some exercise. Okay. After Mai finished talking with Lang Jie, he said something to Qiao who was next to him. Qiao and Mai were husband and wife. When Xiaofan heard Qiao's name for the first time, he joked with Lang Jie that they were destined to be husband and wife. Unfortunately, Lang Jie didn't understand Xiaoxian's words at all. In this team, there were only 7 female warriors, and Xiao was the most powerful one among them. Xiao Mai and his wife were both intermediate totem warriors. In the past, when they went hunting, they would each take 10 people to hunt separately, and then they would meet up again after the hunt. According to the action plan discussed with Mai Zhao, Xiao left with a team to track the giant horned deer. Mai continued to lead the rest of the team along the original route. Lang Jie, you and Ong go to find that wild boar. I'll go over there with the others. Don't go too far. Got it. Lang Jie had set traps in many places on the mountain, including rope traps, falling stone traps, and sharp knife traps. Lang Jie pointed them out to Xiaoxian one by one, so that he wouldn't fall into them. Soon, Lang Jie found the wild boar's trace. He asked Xiaoxian and Mao to wait here, and he went to drive the wild boar over. Xiaoxian stood on a tree, carefully observing the surroundings. Although Mai and Lang Jie said that there were no large beasts around, he still had to be careful of some insects and snakes. The sound of the wild boar came from not far away, and it was approaching. Obviously, Lang Ga's driving worked, and the wild boar didn't run to other directions. Listening carefully, Xiaoxian held the long spear in his left hand, and took out a short spear from his back with his right hand. You can see how I do it later. For those prey, you can first trip them, and then kill them with the long spear. Mao, who was standing on another tree, said with a little arrogance. Without the others, this guy didn't pretend anymore, and acted like an experienced person. Xiaoxian glanced at him, and continued to listen to the sound that was getting closer and closer. Lang Jie and Mai both said that it was a small wild boar, but from the sound, Xiaoxian didn't feel that it was small at all. The wild boar that rushed out of the bush was at least 400 pounds. At first glance, it looked like a bear. But obviously, such a size could only get the word small from Lang Jie and the others. The wild boar rushed very fast. The wild boar seemed to realize that there was an ambush here, so it turned around. Xiaoxian quickly chased after it, and Mao, who was on another tree, ran in front of Xiaoxian. Whoosh! A short spear shot towards the wild boar like an arrow leaving the bow. Whoosh! The spear head went straight into the ground, and the body of the spear passed by the wild boar. The wild boar's reaction was really fast, but after the first spear was shot, the second spear also arrived. Suddenly, there was an ear-piercing squeal in the forest. The second spear was stuck in its neck, and half of the spear head went in. The wild boar screamed, and rushed to a big tree with the spear in its body. When it got close to the tree, it rubbed the spear off its neck with the help of the tree trunk. There was only a little blood on the tip of the spear that was rubbed off. Obviously, Mao's throw just now did not cause much damage to the wild boar. Mao was annoyed that he did not get the spear after throwing twice in a row. He was eager to show off just now, so he did not take the opportunity to throw the spear 3 times in a row. He held the third spear in his hand and continued to chase. He did not find any movement from Xiaoxian behind him, and thought, even if I missed, I will not miss next time. The guy behind me is not as good as me. For many people who were hunting for the first time, even if they had heard the hunting stories and had a solid foundation in theory, they would find that they did not have time to think when they really went into battle. Therefore, the people who were hunting for the first time were either too impatient to take the opportunity to shoot, or they felt that they could not find the best opportunity to shoot, so they kept waiting, and finally found that the opportunity had been missed. Therefore, in Mao's opinion, although he did not take the opportunity to shoot, at least he hit the target once. It was better than Xiaoxian, who did not shoot for a long time. After being stabbed, the wild boar did not slow down. Instead, it ran even faster than before, as if it was going all out. Just when Mao was about to shoot, he heard a quick whoosh sound behind him, and the next moment, the spearhead was inserted into the ground. Just now, the spear almost brushed against the front hoof of the wild boar, and the handle was slanted in front of the front hoof of the wild boar. Apparently, the wild boar did not expect to be stopped like this. It did not stop running forward, and was tripped by the spear. Before it could react, the second spear came, and it happened to be in front of the raised front hoof of the wild boar. The wooden handle of the spear was broken by the wild boar's strong momentum, and the wild boar was also tripped by the two spears. It rolled on the ground, and when it was about to get up, a figure jumped up from a nearby tree, and rushed over. The spear was like a shooting star, falling straight from the sky, and pierced into the wild boar's neck, which was the spot where the skin was hurt just now. An ear-piercing screech was heard, louder than before, and it hurt people's ears. Xiaofan did not pull the spear out immediately. Instead, he gripped the spear and exerted more force. Puff! The spearhead almost pierced through the wild boar's neck, and the wild boar's howling stopped abruptly. Only its four hooves were still struggling, but it was too weak to fight back. Chapter 44. Lang Jie and the others soon appeared next to the wild boar. They had been watching from behind, thinking that it would take a while for the two kids to kill the wild boar. Unexpectedly, they did it so quickly. Not bad. Lang Jie said, looking at the wild boar that was still alive. To use a stone spear, one must be fast, accurate, and strong, or it would be difficult to use it effectively, not to mention the wild boar with thick skin. No matter how good the stone material was, it had to be used properly. However, judging from the situation just now, the two kids were good at using the spear. Lang Jie and the others nodded in their hearts. But Mao, standing next to them, was still in a daze. He did not expect that Xiaofan, who had not made a move before, could be so fast. From the first spear to the wild boar's neck, it was only a blink of an eye. Was this really the first time he had hunted? Not only Mao, but Lang Jie and the others were also sighing in their hearts. No wonder Mao allowed Xiaofan to follow them this time. This kid really had the talent. In fact, Xiaofan was just following his intuition. It was his first time hunting, so he naturally did not have much experience. But when he was chasing the wild boar, there was a moment when his intuition told him that it was a good time to strike. So, he did not hesitate to use his totem power. Two short spears were shot out one after another, and then the last hit was fatal when the wild boar was tripped. If the wild boar was not tripped, it would be difficult for him to accurately pierce the wound. Xiaofan looked at the broken handle in his hand, frowning slightly. Two short spears and a long spear were all broken. The first two were broken by the wild boar, while the long spear was broken because the handle could not bear the force when he stabbed it. It seemed that besides the stone material of the spearhead, he also had to pay attention to the wood. Don't worry, there is plenty of good wood in the forest. We can cut some back and make them in the cave. Lang Jie comforted him. Indeed, in the tribe, there was not much good wood in the surrounding mountains. Stones were okay, but wood was not so satisfactory. Therefore, every time the hunting team went out, they would bring more spearheads, and the wood for the handles would be found in the forest. For larger beasts, Lang Jie and the others would first bleed them and put the blood into a bottle made from plant fruits such as a gourd. The blood could be eaten, and the meat that had been bled was easier to store. At this time, Lang Jie did not forget to impart his experience to Xiaofan. The life of a wild boar is actually very fixed. Most of the time, it will rest in the grass near the water. Its daily foraging route also rarely changes. It will only look for a new place when it runs out of food or when it is threatened. When the temperature in the mountains drops, they will move to the valley that faces the sun and avoids the wind. He planned to skin the wild boar and dig out its internal organs before its body temperature dropped. However, before he could do anything, he heard a few whistles. It was a signal from the microphone, indicating that Lang Jie and the others should hurry over. There was a big prey over there. Lang Jie and the others had no time to skin the wild boar. Their expressions changed, and they packed up their things and rushed to the place where the whistles came from. "Don't worry about that wild boar. Hurry up and follow us," Lang Jie said. Xiaofan did not waste any time. He did not look at the prey on the ground again, and followed Lang Jie and the others. There were different levels of prey. Different prey contained different amounts of energy in the meat. Compared to the same size of meat, the higher level prey could fill your stomach and even make you feel bloated. However, the lower level prey would not only not fill your stomach, but would also feel hungry after a while of exercise. This was also the reason why many warriors preferred the higher level prey in the forest, especially the ferocious beasts, rather than the common wild beasts. There must be a reason why people in the tribe called them ferocious beasts. For example, the black wind that Lang Jie mentioned last night belonged to the category of ferocious beasts. However, the people in the tribe did not dare to provoke and kill the black wind, because it was too difficult. The thumping sound was getting closer and closer. It sounded like a large creature was stepping on the ground. The ground was shaking, and there was also the sound of breaking wood. Many small wild beasts around were running away, trying to avoid this dangerous place. "You two stay away." Lang Jie stopped Xiaofan and Mao from getting closer, and the others quickly went over there. When he saw the creature, Xiaofan took a deep breath. He finally knew why Mai and Lang Jie said that the wild boar was small. Compared to the giant creature in front of them, the wild boar was like a toy car, while the one in front of them was like a fierce armored vehicle. Four-fanged wild boar. It's a four-fanged wild boar. Mao, who was standing next to him, was both surprised and excited. After all, it was not easy to come across such prey when hunting outside. He did not expect to see one on his second hunting trip. How could he not be excited? Generally, male wild boars had a pair of exposed fangs, but the giant boar in front of them, which was more than 10 meters tall, had 4 pairs of fangs. In addition to the big fangs that came out of its mouth like other wild boars, there were 3 pairs on its face. The top pair was on the forehead, and was shorter than the other 3 pairs. The 4 pairs of fangs all rolled in the same direction, almost forming a shield that could easily break the trees in front of it. Xiaofan even wondered if the boar's vision would be affected by its many fangs. According to the classification of wild boars in the tribe, a boar with 3 pairs of fangs was already a ferocious beast, not to mention this one with 4 pairs. The 4-fanged wild boar was so agitated and angry that the mane on its neck stood up like steel needles. When Xiaofan saw the 4-fanged wild boar, there were already a few spears stuck in its body. These spears were obviously not pierced so deeply in one go. Instead, it was because the spears were pushed in again and again. There were also several broken spears. The spearheads or handles were broken during the process, leaving only a section or spearhead on top. Many figures were moving around the wild boar. Mai dodged a thick tree trunk that was lifted by the wild boar. His figure flashed, and the strength in his body reached the peak in an instant. With the help of a spear stuck in the wild boar's body, he jumped up, and his clenched fist was like a hammer. With a strong momentum, he punched the wild boar's body. The area hit by Mai's fist caved in, and the skin and flesh nearby vibrated like ripples. A loud and clear sound of a wild boar was heard, as if it was going to tear the space apart. The blast of air from the wild boar's mouth was like a hurricane, whistling to the surroundings. The nearby branches were all blown away by the blast of air, and countless leaves and broken branches were forcibly blown off from the trees, flying far away. Xiaofan, who was standing not far away, naturally felt such a strong whistling skill. It was so fucking smelly. After being punched again and again, the four-fanged wild boar was really anxious. Some of the protruding stones along the way were smashed into pieces by its hard big hooves. All the obstacles in front of it were smashed, and the wild boar ran even faster, as if it was going to smash God and Buddha. "Don't let it go to the pool," Mai shouted. It was not easy for them to drive the wild boar into the forest, and they could not let it go out. Besides, there were some dangerous guys lurking around the pool, and they did not want to provoke them. Fortunately, those big guys did not like to come out during the day. 15 warriors, 5 of whom were intermediate totem warriors, could not stop the four-fanged wild boar. Fortunately, Xiao and the others, who were hunting the giant antler deer, heard the whistle and came over to join the hunting circle. Hammers, axes, stone ropes, and so on were used. Many spearheads were broken, and the handles were broken. Finally, the four-fanged wild boar was stopped before it ran out of the forest. Hearing the sound of the boar falling to the ground, Xiaoxian's rapid heartbeat also calmed down, and his nervous mood suddenly relaxed. After Lang Jie gave him a safe sign, he ran over. Xiaoxian threw away the piglet's blood, and replaced it with the four-fanged wild boar's blood, which was much more nutritious than the previous one. Lang Jie asked Xiaoxian to drink one mouthful at a time. If he drank too much, he would not be able to bear it, as a totem warrior who had just awakened. Since they had hunted such a good prey, they did not chase other prey for the time being. After a simple cleaning, they moved the boar to the cave on the mountainside. When they returned to the cave, it was almost noon. In order to hunt this big boar, everyone felt a little exhausted. All of their strength burst out in a short time, and once they relaxed, they were very tired. Fortunately, we did not let the four-fanged wild boar run to the pond, or it would have been troublesome if the thorn-black wind came out. Thinking of the situation last time, Lang Jie still had a lingering fear. The others also had the same feeling. Fortunately, they had caught the four-fanged wild boar in time. After roasting the four-fanged wild boar, the hunting group took a short rest after eating. Xiaoxian felt a warm current surging in his body after eating, which made him feel lazy and comfortable. This was the benefit of high-level prey. The strength consumed in the morning was quickly recovering, and at the same time, he gradually became sleepy. Take a nap. You have just awakened, so you need more time to digest meat with high energy content. Mai said. Xiao said that she had tracked the movement of the giant antler deer herd, and that they would go hunting in the afternoon. Because of the large number of the deer herd, Mai would also bring some people to help. Lang Jie and the other 4 stayed in the cave to guard, and also to take care of the 2 kids who were digesting the boar meat. When Xiaoxian woke up again, there were only 5 people in the cave, including Lang Ga. After drinking some water, Xiaoxian still felt a little sleepy. After asking Mai about their movements, he planned to sleep for a while more. At this time, Ong ran in from outside the cave, with a pale face. I just heard the cry of the thorn-black wind. It seems that Mai and the others got into trouble when they brought the prey back. Why would the thorn-black wind come out in the daytime? The sun is not down yet. Lang Jie and the others were so shocked that they jumped up. Although the sun had already set, it was not yet dusk, and the thorn-black wind usually came out at night, and most of the time it was late at night. Do you think it is revenge from last time? So it came out of the pond in advance to block Mai and the others? Ong said worriedly. Shall we go and help them? Someone suggested. Lang Jie opened his mouth, and glanced at Xiaoxian and Mao who were lying on the side. It's okay. You go ahead. It is safe in the cave. Xiaoxian said. It was not suitable for him to join them in his current state. If he went, he would be a burden. You go ahead. Mao also woke up. The thorn-black wind is not easy to deal with. Although Mao did not go with Mai and the others last time, he heard from others that it took almost all the strength of the whole team to get rid of the tough big guy. It was not easy. Okay. Xian, you two stay in the cave and don't go out. Lang Jie and the other four left the cave, and the boulder at the entrance was moved back to block the entrance. There was another vent in the cave, so they would not be suffocated. As long as Xiaoxian and the others did not come out, it was indeed safer to stay in the cave. Chapter 45. After Lang Jie and the others left, Mao paced back and forth in the cave anxiously. He still didn't know what to do. He scratched his head impatiently and looked around, trying to find something to distract himself. When he turned his head, he saw Xiaoxian sitting on the straw mat with his legs crossed and staring blankly. "Hey!" Mao shouted towards that direction, "Why aren't you worried?" Mao didn't have a good impression of Xiaoxian, but now was not the time to care about personal grudges. What's more, there were only 2 kids in the cave. If he didn't find someone to talk to, he would be worried. He always felt that it would be better to find something to do and talk to someone. Xiaoxian raised his head and glanced at him. "So what if I'm worried? If we go out like this, we'll become targets before we even get close. Do you think we'll drag them down?" "I didn't say I wanted to go out." Mao roared angrily. Although he did want to go out and take a look, he still felt uncomfortable when Xiaoxian said it so bluntly. "If you can't go out, what else do you want?" While speaking, Xiaoxian pointed at the big pieces of meat that Lang Jie and the others hadn't had time to roast, and said, "Instead of doing nothing here, why don't you roast them?" "No." Seeing Xiaoxian's attitude, Mao was furious. He felt that Xiaoxian was completely heartless. Why did Mai and the others treat Xiaoxian so well? Xiaoxian ignored Mao. In fact, he was not as calm as he looked. He always felt that something was going to happen, but there was nothing he could do now. He felt frustrated. Beside him was a small bow that Lang Jie had just finished making. It was tightly wrapped with vines, and the string was soaked in beast blood and some kind of grass juice. It was very tough, and did not have the smell of beast blood. Instead, it had the smell of the woods in the forest. If it was hidden in the bushes or trees, it would be very difficult to find. Although this kind of bow was not very lethal to the wild beasts in this forest, it played a very good role in driving the wild beasts away. Previously, Lang Jie had used this bow and set to drive the wild boars towards Xiaoxian and the others. It was a pity that such a bow was too small, and there were not enough materials to make a bow that could withstand the peak strength of a totem warrior. Ground bows, traps, and other things were not very effective against the large beasts in this forest. Most of the time, they still had to rely on manpower. Xiaoxian sighed almost imperceptibly. He wondered how Mai and the others were doing. Hopefully, there wouldn't be any casualties this time. Hunting was always filled with danger. One moment it was calm and tranquil, and the next moment it might be like standing on the edge of a cliff. The slightest carelessness could cause one to fall into the abyss without leaving behind a corpse. Compared to that, the tribe was really comfortable. No wonder old Ku said that they must go into the forest to have a look. If they stayed in the tribe, they would never feel such pressure. Here, they could only try their best to survive under the pressure of the cruel law of nature. If I don't eat you, you will eat me. In this place, there were more ferocious beasts than humans. It was extremely difficult to rely on one's own strength to get food and survive in this dangerous forest. Of course, the warriors in the tribe had their own special source of power, but no warrior was strong enough to go hunting alone in the deep forest. Only by working together and relying on the strength of the group could one survive. Just like the four-fanged wild boar that they had encountered before, and the thorn-black wind that Mai and the others were fighting hard against. There was still a long way to go from a rookie to a hunter. He stopped thinking about it, because it was useless to think too much. Xiaoxian cut off a small piece of meat from the large piece of bloody meat on the side, poked a small hole with a stone spear, and pierced the meat with a half-meter-long stick. Then, he took it to the fire and roasted it for a while. When a layer of burnt skin formed on the surface of the meat, Xiaoxian moved the stick to a position slightly further away from the fire to prevent the oil from flowing out. Xiaoxian continued to roast it. Mao, who was anxious and didn't know what to do, turned around twice and looked at Xiaoxian again. He asked in a bad tone, "What are you doing? Roasting it for yourself?" If it was roasted by the hunting team, they would not only roast such a small piece. But Xiaoxian only roasted such a small piece. Obviously, he roasted it for himself. Yes. Xiaoxian answered weakly. He was really hungry, and the energy he gained from eating the meat was gone again. Now that he couldn't do anything else, he might as well fill his stomach first. Only when he was full would he have the energy to do other things. Mao's face twitched. He was still a little full. The four-fanged boar meat he had eaten before was about the same size as Xiaoxian. Mai had calculated it before he cut it for them. Too much meat would cause indigestion. If he didn't move after eating, he wouldn't be hungry for the whole day. But now Xiaoxian was roasting meat again. "Eat until you die," Mao said angrily. Xiaoxian didn't care. He was really getting hungrier and hungrier. He didn't move much. When the meat was roasted, Mai and the others still hadn't come back. Xiaoxian felt the warm feeling after eating the meat again. He was sleepy. He wanted to wait for Mai and the others to come back, but his eyelids were getting heavier and his mind was a little muddled. He couldn't stay awake anymore. Xiaoxian said to Mao, who was walking back and forth to the entrance of the cave, "I'm going to sleep for a while. Wake me up if anything happens. Don't go out by yourself." Seeing that Xiaoxian still had the mood to sleep, Mao pointed at Xiaoxian angrily. His chest heaved up and down. He wanted to punch Xiaoxian, but he restrained himself. However, after Xiaoxian fell asleep, Mao walked back and forth. As he continued to digest the meat and store the energy, he also felt sleepy. He had no choice. He couldn't wait for Mai and the others to come back, and he couldn't go out of the cave. So he just lay down and fell asleep. The sky outside the cave was getting darker and darker. The sun was about to set, leaving only a little halo on the edge of the mountain in the distance. The halo was getting smaller and smaller. The noisy forest gradually quieted down. The day animals had already retreated to their resting places, and the nocturnal animals were also getting restless as the night deepened. At the same time, Mai and the others, who were stopped at the foot of the mountain, were also very depressed. The thorn-black wind was very territorial. Generally speaking, there would only be one thorn-black wind in one place. There was only one pool at the foot of the mountain, and the area around the pool would be considered as the territory of the thorn-black wind. Theoretically, there should only be one thorn-black wind here. Last time, they only met one adult thorn-black wind. But now, they were stopped by two adult thorn-black winds. After Lang Jie and the other four joined the team, the pressure on Mai and the others was slightly relieved. When they went down the mountain, Lang Jie and the others deliberately brought some herbs from the cave. Some of them were used for external injuries, and the other was used for the thorn-black wind. The herbs mixed by the shaman were not good for ferocious beasts. Now, the thorn-black wind attacked less often. The team of 30 people did not have the upper hand when facing two thorn-black winds, and the two thorn-black winds could not do anything to Mai and the others for the time being. Most of the time, they just watched not far away. But as long as someone ran up the mountain, the two thorn-black winds would quickly run to stop them. "Mai, I feel something is wrong," Qiao said hurriedly, with her back to Mai, staring at the thorn-black wind that was hiding behind a few trees not far away. "Didn't you almost cut off the tail of that thorn-black wind last time?" "I have observed, but there is no trace on the tails of these two thorn black wind. During the last hunt, Mai's team almost used all of their strength to force that crazy thorn black wind back. Mai almost cut off the tail of that thorn black wind. The wound was near the tip of the tail. After 30 days, even if the thorn black wind had a strong recovery ability, it was impossible for it not to leave any trace. But now, there was no trace on the tails of these two thorn black winds. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.